Hi, it's Warren Huart. Hope you're doing marvelously well. I'm sitting here with the great Cameron Webb.
Hello.
How are you, mate?
I'm doing good. How about you, Warren?
I am good. Now, the studio, where are we? What area are we in?
We're in Orange County. We're actually in Santa Ana, California,
Santa Ana, right.
at Maple Sound Studios.
Which is actually, strangely enough, just down the street from Hybrid. We were talking about it.
It is right around the corner, yes.
So those of you who've been watching can, if you know the area, can put it together. It's Maple Studios.
It's Maple Studios, yes.
Can I ask you why?
You know, there's no specific reason, but when we were building the studio and talking about the studio, we were trying to find a name that kind of could transcend over a long period of time, so you don't have this very focused, like kind of cheesy name. So we just kind of came up with, we thought this Maple Studios sound interesting. So
for me, as soon as I hear Maple, for some reason I can think of Trees by Rush.
Most people think like Canada or maple syrup. That's what they're talking about. It's like, and they're like, they always ask me, "You from Canada?" I'm like, "No, I'm friendly, but I'm not from Canada."
Now, are you born and bred in this area?
Yep, grew up down here.
Nice.
I lived here my whole childhood, and then went away to college, and then started working in studios in Hollywood and Los Angeles. A place called Larrabee Studios, another place called NRG, and then.
Oh, you assisted at NRG as well?
Yes, I was assistant at both those studios, and when I was trying to figure out how to get out of being an assistant, I built like a small studio down in Orange County because I grew up here and I liked the way of life, and eventually stopped working at those big studios, and I built this studio here.
Right.
And I built it because I enjoyed the way of life down here, and I wanted to have kids and family and deal with that whole side of things. And there's a lot of hustle in LA, which I enjoy being at for short periods of time, but to live there 24/7 was a little too much for me. But like I said, I mean, I drive up there all the time, all year long, and I like the excitement, but I also like the simplicity of Orange County.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that live down here and work down here, and like anything, when you're like yourself and you're talented and you make great music, people come to you.
They do. They come to you, and you also have to go get them, and you have to grab them and bring them to you. Because hey, here's the thing: it's like it used to be you had to do records in Los Angeles, Nashville, or New York City. But a lot of these bands I work with, they're usually touring acts, and it doesn't really matter where they park after their tour. And so whether it's LA or here, it's a moot point. So here, I give them the beach is close. It's a little bit more laid back than LA, so they're always happy coming here. And occasionally, if someone says, I have to be in LA, then we'll go up to LA and do a record, which I enjoy up there as well. So.
Now, we bonded over, when we first talked on the phone, we bonded over obvious things, and that being Motörhead. Like I was talking to my good friend Glenn Fricker, who has Spectra Sound, and we're all about the same age. So there's that sort of late 70s, early 80s rock period, which is just like, when you're a kid, it was like, at least for me, it was pretty special. And Motörhead, I remember buying Ace of Spades and the, what was the girls' school 10-inch called? St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Okay.
10-inch. I remember buying those. I think the day they came out, both of them, like waiting in the record store, reading in Kerrang that it was coming out, and like being, with my £1.50 buying that album and that EP. It's just, they were, like we were talking about earlier, that they were a mainstream band in England. So to be able to watch Top of the Pops in England and hear like Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, and then Motörhead. I mean, it was awesome for like a little rock kid to like have a band that cool actually be in the charts and be that successful.
Yeah.
So how did you get into that gig?
So, I mean, it was different for me because in America, I would say they weren't as big as they were in England, but in the 80s, MTV was way into them. The Headbangers Ball, they were always on Headbangers Ball, and they would do Eat the Rich and obviously like Ace of Spades and songs like that. So I kind of got introduced to them through MTV with this visual looking like, whoa, that's Lemmy. That guy's pretty intense looking.
Yeah.
And then you jump back to like 2004, and I was doing a record for a group called Zebrahead. And Zebrahead's manager managed Motörhead and Zebrahead. And while we were doing the records, I'd always ask, I'd say, when is Motörhead doing a new record? I want to do one. And he always would say to me, you're too nice of a person. I would never put you in the room with those guys.
Really?
They would tear you apart. And I was like, no, I want to do it. And he kept saying, no. And all of a sudden one day I get a phone call. His name's Todd Singerman. He says, Cameron, I want to talk to you. I'm like, what? He goes, do you want to do a Motörhead record? I'm like, of course I do. He says, well, here's the deal. You're going to meet him at the Sunset Marquee. You guys can have dinner. If you like them and they like you, then you're going to do a record with them. If they don't like you, good. You tried, and it just is what it is. So we went up there, sat and ate steak and drank and talked shop. And it's funny because I almost didn't get the record because when I looked at Motörhead, on my way to the actual meeting, I went to the Tower Records, which was still there on Sunset Boulevard. And I said, you know what? I don't have the last couple Motörhead records. So I looked through the list. I looked through it, and it seemed like there were 25 Motörhead records. I was like, fuck, which one is the right record? I don't know which is which. So I didn't buy any of the records then, so I just referenced my old references. But the one thing that I wanted to do with Motörhead was make sure they were modern sounding. And I didn't want it to sound too trashy. I wanted it to be full and big sounding because you had bands like System of a Down and who had great sounding records at the time. I wanted that for Motörhead.
Yeah.
So I approached them with almost more of a like, hey, I want to make a heavy record, almost a metal record. And Lemmy said to me, he says, Cameron, I'm a rock and roll band. We're not a heavy metal band. And I looked and I was like, oh man, I think I just blew it. And the manager, when we walked out with the manager was walking with me. He goes, well, Cameron, you almost did a good job, but you shouldn't have brought up that heavy metal thing. And I was like, ah. And then the next day I get a phone call. All right, you're on. Show up at rehearsal tomorrow at, I think it was Mates or something in the Valley. And I showed up and ever since since then, I produced every record they've done after that. At one point, Lemmy would just say, hey, if we're going to do something, let's run it by our producer, Cameron, and see what he thinks. And so whether it was live DVDs or if they were doing commercials or anything, I built a trust with those guys, especially on that first record, but it lasted for 12, 13 years. It still lasts till today. I still, I oversee any live stuff that comes out, and
that's amazing.
It all goes through my ears. So it was it's been a good time.
Well, for me as a fan, and I know we talked about this on the phone, for me, it's like obviously 70s, 80s. I wasn't a big fan of most of the 90s albums.
As well as I.
And then I got back into liking them when you started making their records. So I actually think, even though, yes, there's a heavy metal, they definitely sound loud and modern and punchy and everything, I feel like the spirit of the original stuff, especially the Ace of Spades kind of Overkill kind of period, is still there. So it's kind of, because when you think about it, you probably read this and heard this from a million people, probably them as well. In America, they had a hard time because people weren't sure what their genre was at first. Mm-hmm. They used to get lumped into with punk rock or rock, depending on the record store owner. They would be like, what is this? Ace of whatever? These guys are all like wearing leather with like, what is this thing? And so, they would get put in like punk rock category. And even though to us in England, they were definitely like a rock band, a heavy rock band, it's that kind of aesthetic, that attitude, which set them apart in a great way. Yeah. That, I think also speaks to the fact that, we were talking about earlier, you work with bands like Pennywise and stuff and NoFX. So that sort of, they all operate in that same area, that kind of middle finger, kind of irreverent. Yeah. Which is the original spirit of rock and roll anyway. Yeah, I think that the spirit they had, they had this reckless thing, and they made great records their whole career, but I felt like when I came in the picture, I wasn't just going to, I'm just going to do another Motörhead record. This is what it is. I came in there with a fire saying, here's what I think the fucking vision is. Here's what I think we need to do. These are the elements where we need this excitement. I think they liked that I was excited to telling Mickey D, like, hey, those drum fills can be better. And it's like, Mickey's like, you know who I am? I'm Mickey D. I'm a great drummer. It's like, I know you're great, but you can be better. You can be better at what you do. And I would do that to each one of them. I would pick them apart. And at first, like when they're doing it with you, they resist because they're like, who are you? And it's like, you know what? It doesn't matter who I am. I just want you to be better than what you were. Like, you've always been great, but I don't want you to get lazy. I never want people to take the seat and be like, just doing another record. It's like, no. Let's let me strangle you till it's interesting. Like, and let's do that. And with a band like Motörhead, they're very emotional, and you had to every day had to be different. You had to excite them in some way. And whether it was just pranks or just having fun, it wasn't about like, hey, we're just going in the studio pressing buttons. It was like, we're living our lives. And that's why Motörhead was so special, because they enjoyed that side of things, and they enjoyed the recklessness, because that's the way they lived their whole lives. Absolutely. And it comes through in the music, it comes through in everything that Lemmy ever touched. With all the different band members, he was definitely a leader. Yeah. From at least what I can tell. You obviously work with them, so but there's the spirit never changed. Yeah, it's funny. Everyone sees him as the leader, but
Mickey, and I mean, my time was with Mickey, Phil, and Lemmy. I didn't deal with the other guys. And as much as Lemmy was the leader, so were Mickey and Phil in their own ways. Like they were so important to every choice that we made and everything we did. And Lemmy gets a little more glory than those guys, but they were all important because I look at it this way: like you take Motörhead, and you got Mickey, who is great timing, hits hard, he's really solid. If he was a train wreck and you put him with Phil and Lemmy, it would be a little bit messy. But because he's so solid, and then you put these guys who are with Lemmy with his rugged tone, and Phil, who's just, I mean, he's an amazing guitar player. Yep. You mix the three together and it works perfect. You couldn't have taken them out. I mean, I know the earlier days there was Filthy Phil on drums, who was also incredible. Like all those early records he did, I love those. Orgasmatron, they had a magic too, and obviously. So
Fast Eddie.
Fast Eddie Clark too. all those guys. And Wurzel, they're all great players. So, you know.
See, Wurzel seems like the new guy to me. Because I remember the Fast Eddie, I remember when Wurzel was in the band.
Well, Wurzel and Phil joined at the same time.
Oh, they did?
Wurzel, so let me tell a quick story.
Yep.
Wurzel and Phil showed up at a tryout for Motörhead, and they both showed up at the same time, and they walked in the door, and Phil Campbell said to Wurzel, he said, "Hey, tune my guitar." To Wurzel. Wurzel's like, "What? Tune your guitar?" And he's like, "Yeah, tune my guitar." And Wurzel tuned up Phil's guitar before that rehearsal. And like you and me probably would have tuned it off, so you sounded like shit. Yeah. But he didn't. He tuned it right, and they both tried out, and they both made the band. They both joined the band at the same time. So it was an amazing thing that they both they were both trying out, and they both made it. It's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And suddenly they become a twin guitar band.
Yep.
Which was kind of a big deal. And definitely, because Lemmy's tone when I was a kid was just the biggest bass tone you'd ever heard.
It still is. Yeah, it still was in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just because I've opened that can of worms, what we're going to go over and look at an amp in a second, because you have one of his amps here.
Uh-huh.
What was his cabs when you were recording?
So we had a couple of different things. In general, he had a Marshall cabinet, and one of the cabinets he had was like a bigger size one. So I don't know, I think it had 15s in it. One had 15s, but we also ran normal Marshall cabinets as well. So I would basically run that through there, and we would just turn it on 10. I mean, not on 10, but there was a setting. I'll show you the settings that we used to use, but it was gridding up everything. It was basically guitar amps, except for the one bigger frame one, which, it carried bottom end, but the tone he liked was not the bottom end. Lemmy never liked low end. He would always ask me to cut it out, or it's too, we need to brighten it up. And he didn't like high end either. He liked mid range. Mid range was his deal, and that's kind of that old 70s sound is mid range on recordings and on like live performances. So
definitely what a Marshall has bags of.
Yeah,
tons of mid range. For me, the Marshall, at least humbly for me, the secret was always the presence control over the treble.
Yep.
You know, crank that before you crank the treble.
Yep, agreed. Totally agree.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
The Marshall sound.
He would have the treble all the way down, and then I believe the presence was like at 2 o'clock or so.
Yeah. There's just something about that was always like the magic on it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we could do this for hours and talk about stuff like that, but let's check out the studio. All right, so tell me a little about this beautiful console you have here.
So what we have is this is a Trident 80C. And this came from Nashville, and it's fairly new to this studio. I've only had it in here about 8 months or so, 6 to 8 months. Nice. It came from Nashville, from a producer out there who worked with the Dixie Chicks and a bunch of artists like that. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is that it's a great sounding board. It's in good shape. It's clean. The mic pre's sound awesome. Everything about it is what I need, because part of what I do is I like to bus things, and they have a great bussing matrix. So with my drums, I'll bus my kicks and my snares, or I'll bus my guitars, because I don't like to record. I don't really need to record multiple microphones for guitars. I love it when you use the bussing on a console and you bus your 57 and your 421 to combine to get a tone, because I feel like the bus, you get a bigger sound when you're using the analog gear to get that chain done. So I have kind of an old school style of recording when it comes to whatever I don't want to do a lot of post-production fixing. I want to make the best product. So if someone took my session and they kind of throw everything around zero, it's going to sound like the record I'm trying to make. I don't want to say, hey, I'm going to fix it in the mix, because I feel like you can never actually fix anything in the mix. You have to create the style and the mood and the feel and the vibe, which Warren doesn't like to talk about. You have to create that when you're going, because it's so hard to get it later. And the important thing about it is a console. And one of the big things about the console is I do a lot of sessions. I work with a lot of different artists, rock, hard rock, kids shows, whatever it is. But I need the ability to have drum sets mic'd up. I need the ability to have multiple guitar amps, multiple bass settings. So when I have a session, when it's a last minute session, I can set things up really fast and keep rolling. And because it's a public studio, but it's also kind of a private studio, sometimes I can let my drum mics and my chains sit for several months and not touch them. Obviously, each session I'll come in, I'll re-EQ and do things, but I don't have to set everything up on a daily basis. So it saves me a ton of time, and it gives me the ability to focus on these different artists more, as opposed to like, hey, I'm plugging in cables and stuff like that, which can be kind of painful. And that's why a console like this is great for me, because I have my 32 channels and it's all high quality. And I also have other mic pre's that I keep over on the other side that I can also use as well. So
it's in beautiful condition.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it comes through on the camera. We'll put some stills up, but it's in beautiful condition. I love just seeing the Trident name here. You know, as I was saying earlier, as a Queen fan, I think of Trident, you know, the first couple of albums. And you know, I'm sure many people will know the history, but, you know, I'm sure you do as well. Trident is a studio, no longer exists, but a famous studio. And in all those days, the engineers were very specific about consoles. And they'd go to the manufacturers, the Neves, the Cadacs in England as well, and they would be like, oh, we need this, this, and this. And the story goes is the engineers at Trident could never quite get the console they wanted. So they built their own consoles.
Right.
So the A range, of course, there's only like half a dozen, I think, in the world.
Exactly, yeah.
Those are like the original ones they built. But now it's Malcolm Toft, isn't it? Who's
I believe it is, yeah.
I believe the designer, yeah. So they have that sort of heritage that I love, you know, that it sort of feels like the engineers designed what they wanted to use, as opposed to being, you know, force-fed something that maybe is technically good, but isn't intuitive.
Yeah, and they came, I mean, I did a lot of research on Tridents over the years. I've actually owned several different kinds of Tridents.
Oh, great.
I've owned a 24, I've owned a 70, and when I did all my research, I realized you have your A ranges that came, and then you had your Trident 80 series, which was an amazing console. It was more like the A range, and they were a bigger console. And then they started making the Trident 80Bs, and that was the one that a lot of people used for years through the 80s. And then the C was just a step above that later on, with the same sound of the Trident, the 80B. So it's like all those consoles were always like really high quality. When you had the 70, which has good mic pre's, it wasn't quite as good as what these consoles were. It was the precursor in a sense to some of that. I know they happened around the same time, but
sure,
there's certain things about it that weren't quite as good. And these boards are really special. And you have, like, they always talk about Guns N' Roses worked on Appetite on like an 80B. And
I didn't know that.
And if you go to Matt Sorum, who has an amazing studio, he has an 80C in his studio, and he always talks to me. He was always saying, "Oh, my 80C is so great." And then when I had the opportunity to get this, I was like, you know what? I love the sound. Let's go for it. So,
well, I think you just doubled the used value of these now.
Not like Dave Grohl did with the Neves. I mean,
that was already unbelievably expensive.
Everything skyrocketed.
Yeah, yeah. But that was already pretty prohibitively expensive. Hey, I love the fact that you're like me. You're the NS10 Genelec guy. This is somebody who was making records in the mid-90s.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I learned. I mean,
Same here.
I learned from people making records starting around 96 on. And I mean, NS10s are the staple. Now, the only thing I do different now is I have a subwoofer on my NS10s, because you would never be able to do the modern music now without subs. So my NS10s almost sound more like my Genelecs than you'd imagine. I don't use my Genelecs as much as I used to, because these, with the sub, these are an awesome sound. So yeah.
I've recently moved away from the Yamahas because I spent so much time on the Genelecs that now they're the only things I know.
Yeah.
You know, so hey, I've got 1031s and 32s. I use the 32s in my main room at the moment, but they're great speakers. And I'm sure you agree, and maybe you can elaborate, but for me, it's really like, what do you know?
Yeah.
It's probably the best thing, you know.
That's the thing. It's if you get good with one set of speakers and you listen to a lot of records on that, then you're going to learn what your records are going to sound like. And that's the thing. I've spent so much time with these that I could switch to other speakers, but I would have to take a long period of time of just growing. And obviously a lot of it is like, what I do is I take it to the car. I'll mix in here. And when I feel like I've made a sufficient mix, I take it to the car, I turn on the car and I go, okay, you know what? Great. I'm lacking some bottom end or high end or whatever it is. And that's where I figure everything out. And I come back in here and then I adjust to that. So you can switch your speakers, but there's a magic to what these NS10s do and have done for years. And there's just that clarity of things in the mid-range that you can find. And that's why I know how to dig with them. The important thing about NS10s is if you can make something sound good on NS10s, they sound great everywhere. Sure. With the Genelecs, you can make stuff sound great on here. It doesn't sound great everywhere. So you have to work a little bit harder with the NS10s, but the Genelecs just make you a little bit lazy. And it's a slight thing. Once you learn it, you're not lazy anymore. But like,
what I always felt with the Yamahas was if guitars sounded offensive and aggressive and like, oh, that's when they were perfect. I know. You know what I mean? They kind of go,
it has to sound obnoxious and hurts your ears.
Yeah,
and it's perfect. Because otherwise they're going to be too muddy when you take it to the car.
Yeah, exactly. There's a sort of 3, what is it? It's like, isn't it like a 7 dB lift at 1.5K? It's like, they kind of go low, mid, like this. They're like got this huge mid-range bump. So if the guitar's not going, and not like, oh, ear bleeding.
Yeah.
It sounds almost scoopy if it's not doing that.
Yeah.
Well, beautiful. I mean, it's a lovely console. So you've got 24 VUs on the channels, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't used one of these in a long time, but I love the feel of it. It's really freaking substantial. I think the 70s felt a little flimsy, didn't they?
Yeah, they're a little bit smaller is what they were.
Yeah, this just feels like
no, it's
substantial.
a beast. It's definitely a beast. It's great.
Yeah, really beautiful. So it's do you have?
I do. I have Westlake audios. They're mains. I don't know the exact model, but they're big. They're really big. They
huge.
I think they have 2 12s on each side and a couple of horns and mid-range tweeters.
Nice.
They came. The funny thing is, so, and I don't know the exact story. I was told this story, but Stevie Wonder had a studio at one point, and the bank repossessed it, and they put it into a storage place, and then eventually the storage place owned it. And one of my friends worked at the storage place and they were getting rid of the speakers. And he said, Cameron, here's the deal. He goes, if you record this record for me, I'll give you these fancy $10,000 speakers. I was like, what? Really? He's like, yeah, no problem. So I recorded an album and then I put the speakers in and I basically, that's where I got those speakers. Because at the time I couldn't afford that kind of money on main speakers. Building a studio kind of ground up, you have to take what you can. Right. And it was a good.
And you're a sadist and an oral adventurer.
So I put this up for you because Lemmy actually wrote this. Lemmy on the last record we did, a lot of times he would just say things like just crazy stuff, and he wrote that and he handed it to me, and I thought when I did that record we actually put it up so when people walk in they'd see that. So for Warren I specifically put
fantastic.
That's drawn by Lemmy. So.
Oh, nice. So I've done the last couple of Ace Frehley records, and Ace, we had Slash come over and play a guitar solo. So he wrote on the rule paper, he wrote Slash, studios down driveway through the gate, and put it on the back of my wife's car. And so Slash comes in, he takes a picture of it and puts it up on his Instagram and gets like thousands of hits and like the thing. So I kept
similar, yeah.
There's just something about, for us, I mean, it's like we're fans of music.
Yeah.
And really, we're just, humbly the guys behind the scenes. And we get to work with people that have changed people's lives.
Yeah.
Write songs. My hairs are all standing on end.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It is.
Because we grew up on music and we love it so much. And then to be involved in that. And it's not starstruck, but it's like this excitement that those people change other people's lives. And that we love that. Whether it's a little note like that, we keep those things because it was special. It's like that person that a lot of people look up to sat next to me and said, I'm going to write this thing about you. And or whether the Slash moment, like those are huge people in rock and roll. Like they broke new grounds in so many ways.
Yeah. And for me with Lemmy, look what we were talking about earlier. It's like you turn on Top of the Pops, Spandau Ballet, Duran Duran, Haircut 100, Motörhead. Like, so you're a little rock fan, and you're just like, yes, like he's representing. There is Lemmy like live on Top of the Pops.
Yeah, it's great.
pretty amazing times. All right, well, let's check out what else you got going on. Cool. So let's talk about some outboard. What do we have going on here?
Well, first, I want to talk about something. You brought up earlier about the 90s. You're like, you saw the NS10s and you said, this is someone who got brought up in the 90s. And in a way, like, I almost took offense to it, but there's an appreciation because I think the 90s, there was a period of time where engineering and producing, you had to be really good at what you did to be those people in those rooms. And I learned from a lot of those people. So I learned from a lot of those experiences that I think when people who are starting now fresh, they don't have all these experiences that I have, whether it was with tape or locking tape machines or being prepared for Michael Jackson's or artists like that. Like, I spent my time in the 90s doing that. And in a way, like, I've had artists come to me and they say, hey, this drum sounds so great, Cameron. It almost sounds like it's like late 90s. And I was like, that's kind of an insult, but it's a compliment too, because they were great sounds at that time. And I'm like, is that okay for you? And they're like, no, that's what we want. So it's like, I can do the modern sounds, whether it's, you can trigger out left and right, like that's kind of the modern deal, but I enjoy the full reality. And that part of what all this gear comes to is a lot of this came from the 90s or earlier than the 90s. And it's things like, when you talk about like me having a studio and as a producer for a living, I didn't all just walk in this store and go to Guitar Center and say, I'm going to buy all these things. Like, none of these things, I don't even think ever came from Guitar Center. I don't know where they came from, but there's a story to each how it was bought or how I found it. But over the years, I collected things. And the reason why I collected things is because I was working for other producers that they would use the Distressor on something. I was like, wow, that's amazing on bass. I want to do that. So I would, at those times, I would find enough money. I'd save money from those records. I'd buy one Distressor. Next month, I buy one of these because I saw this on a kick drum. Or you look at like the reverbs, which I don't use this reverb anymore because there's so much in the box that
this was the Andy Wallace reverb.
Yeah, exactly. So
SPX 90.
Nirvana, Nevermind, tells me Teen Spirit, like that's it. And you have things like this. These delays at the time were so important, where now we can lock it all on the computer, and it doesn't get used very often. Stuff like this is actually kind of unique. This is
tell me about this.
So this is called an Effectron 1.
I don't know this.
Delta Labs. So I got introduced to this by 311, and what it is, it's kind of like an old school delay where you can tweak the feedback so you can get it to go wah, 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 and then you can mess with these buttons over here and it changes the pitch. So you can get these kind of 70s sort of weird trip out things where you can actually create kind of a sound where it's doing pitch and feedback and delay. And I saw a lot of that like on the 311 record I worked on, and that's why I bought this. And I probably bought it for $100 at the time. And it's just a great box, and it does its one thing.
Delta Lab Effectron 1.
Does its one thing amazing. And it's fun because when you're on the computer, sometimes it's not fun to do these delay tricks because you're just like, you're moving little things. But
you're drawing in. Like...
drawing's not fun. Like here, you're grabbing this, and this is, and it feeds back, and it never does the same thing twice. All of a sudden, luckily, you're recording it as you're going, and then you press the buttons, and that's why it's so special. And then, but more importantly is this unit right here, the AMS DMX, a digital delay. And it was one of the early digital delays in the 80s that if you went to a studio in the 80s on 2000s, this was always in the back of the room. And you could use this for multiple things. You could use it for delays, but it was also a sampler. It's an 8-bit sampler.
Fantastic.
So early records, like Pantera records, you'd see guys like Terry Date, they drop a sample in here, and then you could, off the tape machine, you could fire this and it would trigger. Now here's the key. There was a delay. So if you put this on a kick drum on a record, it would be late every time. So what you'd have to do is there's two things on a tape machine. There's a sync head and there's the repro head. Right. So you'd have to run it from the head. So I think you'd have to run this from the sync head, and then you would put it through a delay. I think it was about 43 milliseconds. I could be wrong. And when the 43 milliseconds would line up with the repro head. So this sample would trigger exactly with the kick drum. And if you listen to like Terry Date did Pantera records and Deftone records and amazing Limp Bizkit, lots of tons of amazing records. And I loved his sounds and his styles. And I was fortunate enough to work with him as an assistant for on and off. And these were things that I would see him using. And nowadays I use it for harmonizers, so I can take my vocals and I can spread them wider. And the box has stuff too. They have great stuff as well. But this is kind of that original thing that they would use. I
use an H3000 to do that vocal thickening where you pitch it up and down. There's just something about, even though it's digital, I almost feel like it's still random.
Yeah, it is.
It's like, and I do, correct me if I'm wrong, people, leave comments and questions below. I believe that they were first people to make digital delays. I think AMS were the first company.
Okay.
In the 70s, they started making digital delays.
And they had like a little sister to it, or brother or sister, you want to call it. It was the RMX. It was the reverb unit.
Yeah.
This is the DMX. That was the RMX.
Yeah.
And it looks almost the same, a little different. But for reverbs, phenomenal for reverbs, especially like you take like your Motley Crue records with this big snare drum.
Yeah.
That was those
nice.
those reverb units a lot of times.
Now the Allen Smart.
I mean, that's a must for a studio, because I mean, I love the SSL sound, and the SSL sound comes from the stereo bus of the SSL, and obviously from the channels as well. But the important part is you run your mix, and it has this way where it grabs onto the mix, and it holds it really tight. So when I was working in studios, I was always working on SSLs, and then I eventually had my own studio. I'm like, why am I not getting this sound? And at the time, I would take my Distressors and I put them on a stereo bus, and they worked great, no problem. But then eventually, I found the money to buy something like this, and it doesn't get unpatched from my stereo bus. It just sits there 24/7. Yeah, I tweak it and move it depending on the different records.
You're using this channel to control that?
Yes, I always put it in the stereo mode.
Note everybody has said exactly the same as mine. Pretty much everybody on the planet. And it's full over to 30, and the release is always set on auto.
Yeah.
Joe Zook set me straight on that a few years ago, because I hated SSL bus compressors because I grew up on Neves and whatever. And I was like, I can never make it sound. He goes, where'd you got the release? And I was like, I was trying to match the release with the song. He's like,
no, auto.
Yeah.
And the attack too. The important thing is the attack, because if you put it at the top, then it suffocates your mix. Yeah. This lets all your transients come through. And then when you're hitting it fairly hard, when you're hitting it there, it's controlling, but it's not suffocating your mix. When you're hitting, if you're getting up in the middle, then it's gonna be destroying your mix for sure.
It's funny to see it, like just to see
almost
the four and that. I mean, obviously these vary from mix, but those three middle controls, exactly. It's like, I don't think I've ever touched
it. I very rarely. The funny thing is sometimes I'll be like, man, I can make it sound better. I'll take it off the auto, and it's always pumping too much. And I'm always like, okay, there we go, we're good.
Yeah, I know. You're like this. You're like, it's smarter than me.
Yeah, it's simple.
Now, Jeff Daking, I believe, is incredibly talented. It's funny because his best stuff is modeled on Trident stuff, isn't it? And he's a really, really humble guy. He used to be in the Blues Magoos in the 60s, the drummer for the Blues Magoos.
I do know.
So
I've spent time with Jeff Daking, so I know.
So you know more.
I drove him around LA one time, and he told me a lot of stories. But these guys, you know what I love? These things. I'm a big fan of the Neve 33609.
Sure.
I think that's one of the most amazing compressors, and I love it on a drum stereo bus or a drum, anything to do with drums. I love the way it parks it right there, but it keeps it alive.
Yeah.
And this is very similar to what that does.
Sure.
And I use this on, a lot of times my kick and snare subgroups, I'll use that. So I'm not over compressing because I have my original sound, and I bring this in there and it sounds amazing.
Snare sub.
Exactly. And I'll use it on bass as well too. But yeah, you see, I mean, that sticker's probably been there for a little while.
Yeah. No, Jeff's stuff is great. Huge fan. It's funny when you went up and you went, and I use this on my kick in when recording. It's the only thing on kick I ever compress going in is a 160.
Yeah. So my whole thing is with the kick drum is I don't like to put a compressor on it because I feel like I either lose bottom end or I lose something. So I like to side chain my kicks and my snares with compressors, because a lot of times if I take like an LA2A and I put that on a snare drum, yeah, it's awesome, but it's squashing it, and I'm not getting some of the attack that I need to breathe. And that's why I have a tendency to use these as subs. And these guys here, I mean, these are a standard thing. They're a very simple compressor, and you can use them wrong really easily. If you have your threshold or your ratio too high, it just destroys your sound. But if you park it in a good spot, it helps level things a little bit. It's one of the few compressors you can put on an insert and it doesn't suck the life out of it if you use it properly. That's the key. And you're obviously you're using it properly. So
yeah, no, I love them, and they're still they're pretty inexpensive. I think they're going to rocket up in price gradually as people.
They've been like $200 for the last 15 years. I swear, like $200 to $300. They've always been around that price range, and that's why I have so many. And they were bought at different times. I probably had these for 15 years. I've probably only had these for 10 years or so. So
And then the Distressor, probably the most versatile compressor on the market.
I mean, it's a given. It's the most compressor and most important compressor in my rack for sure. I mean, I can use it for so many things. It's great for vocals, number one for vocals. It's great for bass. I mean, you name it. Guitars, clean guitars. It's phenomenal. It's so versatile in every way. And when I first started using it, I was scared to death of it because I didn't understand the way it worked with the inputs. And once I learned it, I'm like, I can't go back. Like to track a vocal without that, it would have to be a 1176 would be my only other choice.
I was gonna say,
why don't I have that? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's okay. No, I'm an 1176 fan, but I know that I can make this sound like an 1176.
Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying. Now the retro, I had a pair of these for a while on loan and really had a fun time with them. The thing I see it says Vox on here. One of the things I liked on bass was I could turn that side chain up and let the bottom end breathe quite a lot on it. I think this is a pretty tasty unit. Are you having fun with it?
Yeah. So when I was an assistant, I saw Sylvia Massey work on a couple records, and she was big into these things called the stay level, and I love the stay level. You put that on vocals, like she put on the Johnny Cash vocals on that acoustic record. They're so amazing, and they're like something that I have over here. They're these tube compressors that just add life to a performance. It's not, maybe it grits it up a little bit, maybe it brightens it, I don't know. But when these retros came out, they had a version of the stay level, and then they had this one, which is a 176. And this just has more knobs and more buttons to be more diverse. So
sure.
So I started using this, and this goes on lead vocal all the time. I mean, I usually use it with a chain with Distressor and this together.
Great.
They're brilliant. They're so good because you have your tube compressor and then you got your regular compressor.
How are you setting this? Are you using this on light compression, then have the Distressor picking up more peaks?
I usually do the Distressor first.
Distressor first,
and
okay.
I hit it fairly hard. And I hit this pretty soft actually.
Right.
And just a little control, a little that like, you want to add that grease where like, if you compress good, it makes a signal last longer. If you look at a waveform,
sure,
you see that if a waveform is really spiky and there's highs and lows, you're not compressing very good. And if you compress it where there's not as many spikes, but it also doesn't sound compressed, that means you're doing a good job. And that's what this does. Could I use just this? Yeah, you could use this. Could I use just this? Yes. But the two together, it's a glue. And it's the same thing. You could swap 1176 out for either one of these, and it would do the same trick.
So we were I was looking at one of your sessions earlier, and I said to you, looks like one of my sessions, big, fat, nice printed tones. And I gave that to a younger mixer recently. This artist I work with wanted to use this guy. And he texted me when I was out on location recording a live band. Do you have the properly recorded files? Seriously. He was like a 25, he said to me, properly. I'm like, excuse me? He goes, oh yeah, well these have got compression already on them. Like and I just think he was used to getting completely uncompressed, de-eyed signals, really, really dynamic things.
Yeah.
And then doing all that in mixing. I just think you and I came up at a time when, not all records, but a lot of records you just pull up on the faders and.
Well, think about this. At the time, we didn't have, sometimes this would be all the compressors you had. You didn't have all these compressors in a computer,
sure,
so you couldn't put 1176 on every channel. So you would have to choose, what's the most important thing? Well, the vocal is. So let's use the most important compressor. That would have been there. And you choose that. And what we do is when we track this way, usually you're doing the vocals on their own. So you can take the fanciest compressor and you can plug it on your vocals and you can make it the biggest sound. And back then you couldn't. Like if you use that, then all of a sudden you can't use this for your bass. You can't use this. So for us, we're used to tracking the exact sound we want is the mix. Yeah. Maybe not over EQing like a vocal or anything, but you're putting it up there so when someone pops it into their mix, oh, maybe I need to compress and EQ a little bit, but they're not drastically like, oh, let's start compressing, let's start working. The work's already been done because we've done it so many times and we know. Yeah. I guess you call it old school, but it's also like it's making our lives easier.
Well, I also think it's committing because if I've got a sound now, in younger guys' defense, if they've got 5 plugins to recreate that, okay, I get it. But ultimately, if we're committing to a sound, we understand the relationship of the next sound. okay, I've got an overdub to do. This sound influences the next sound.
Exactly.
I'm not just at the end trying to figure it out in a mix.
Well, but that's the point you just touched on there is so important, because it's getting an artist to commit to something, and that's the hardest thing, because we have 1,000 choices, and as a producer, you come in and they say, okay, here's what I want to do, and you say, okay, here's how you're gonna do it. And this is the path. That's how it's gonna end up, and we choose what it's going to be, and that's so important, because when you're mixing, if you have 100 choices to make, you're going to do a terrible mix. If you have one choice to make, because you've already made all the choices, your brain can focus on the thing that is most important, the sonics and how everything fits together and the catchiness of this song. So for us, if we commit to these 500 things before we go into a mix, we've got less work than the kid that goes in there with nothing compressed and just like weird levels. We're steps ahead of them. We can do it faster. We can do it more efficiently, because our brain only can focus for a short period of time. We train it to focus for longer periods of time by just repetitive work. But it's so important to commit. And one important thing you said too is you treat these things, these sounds, and then you track a bass. And with that bass, you track it, and then you track a guitar on top of that. Well, because you already have the bass there, you know you don't need this bunch of bottom end on this guitar. So you choose to like scoop it out. If you were to just record the guitar without that bass, you might put a bunch of bottom in there, and then you put the bass in with the bottom, then you've got a train wreck of frequencies fighting each other. Sure. So we make these choices as producers, like, this is the style of the record I want. I want it to be retro. I want it to be modern. I want it to be heavy metal. I want it to be whatever, or I want it to be pop. It doesn't matter what you want it to be, but it's going in with a vision, because you take it back to the Phil Spectors of the world. They had a vision of this wall of sound. We have this vision of what our new wall of sound is going to be. And for me, it's like big frequencies everywhere. I want to fill up the whole spectrum, not in the Phil Spectrum way, but in my own way with, I love bottom end and things like that, that I want to be able to turn up my mix really loud and it sounds great. I don't want to turn up loud and be like, I'm getting tired, I need to turn it down. Mm-hmm. I want to listen loud. And I want because the kids, I mean, any kid I know wants to turn it up too. When they get the first time they listen to a record, they're like, and then just, yeah, this is great. Yeah. And that's just what we do. And me as a kid and as an adult, whatever it is, I don't even know what I am. The first thing I do, I buy a record, I turn it up, I listen, I love it, I don't love it. It is what it is. And I don't want it to be taxing on my ears. Yeah, I agree. That's a great analogy. I love that story. I love that explanation, sorry. Okay, the TL Audio. What are you using this on? He's making fun of me right now. No, I'm not. So the TL Audio it's a cheap, I don't even know when it came out, but it's kind of a cheap tube thing, and it was actually no, I don't know anything about it. It was like a lower level thing, and and the funny thing is, I got this. The studio was going out of business, and they're like, and I was like, I want that. It's good for simple things like keyboards, or it's a all right compressor. It's not, you can't compare it to this. It's a different world. Right. There are tubes in it, which is cool. It's just a simple thing. It's not it's not elaborate. But it works for certain things. And if you want to, for a long time I would use drum subgroups where I would want to crank it too hard. I would crank this thing so hard, and it was this great thing that I could add in and added life. So it's one of those trick things where like maybe it's not the best unit, but it does some things really cool. So I love it. It's great. No, it's funny because we both know Ulrich and Ulrich Wild, and he uses like ART stuff and gets great results. Yeah, who cares? Yeah. No, I didn't know that was inexpensive. I actually have never seen this before. I didn't know what it was. It's a mic pre as well. So it's a mic pre. So I got two mic pre's, stereo, two mic pre's, compressor. Nice. It's also two line amps. It's got a cool function here. So if you want to do keyboards, you plug it in right here. We don't have to go through all the patch bay. Nice. And then there's this extra gain where you can bring it up and down. So it's kind of it's like if I want to do a keyboard, if I want to go to the Grace, I got to go through there and then to here and then there. Here it's just bam, bam. We're recording keyboards. So it's awesome. Next up is the Focusrite. Focusrite, it's just, the funny thing is I don't use it enough. And it's very clean. I love Neve and things that are dirty and gritty, and this is not that. This is like, if you want to do a pop vocal that's super crisp and clean as can be, plug this thing in, done. It's got the option it's got amazing EQs. These Focusrite EQs are insane. Great bottom end, sizzly top end, like your pop production. I mean, I wouldn't need all this stuff for vocals. I could just use this. It's great. Compressor, limiter, it's got it all. Very nice. Good now box. The Grace, I
I've never used the Grace stuff. Tell me about it.
The Grace, it's a hidden treasure. These Grace things, they're awesome. It's like a Neve. They're very similar to a Neve. I don't know what to say. They're simple. It's just one knob.
Good.
And my vocals almost always go through it. I usually go through that and through this other chain.
Oh, I see.
It's great for bass. It's great for guitars. It's great for rooms, whatever. They're really high end EQs. I mean, mic pre's. Great mic pre's.
Fantastic.
Equal to any Neve API, any of that stuff.
I'll have to try it out. And what's that below?
So,
oh, those are the original Neves. Is that correct?
This belongs to a friend of mine, a guy named Johnny K, who's a great producer and awesome friend. And these were the line amps that came out of 80 series consoles. And if you look online, it'll tell you about how some people put mods into these and made them mic pre's. So this is basically, I had a tech go through this once, and because I wanted to know exactly what it was, and he said it's a mix between a 1073 and a 1081. So it's not one or the other. It's this weird hybrid that someone had modded. So they're great. I mean, it's a Neve. So
Nice.
it's when we compare these two, you might not even know the difference.
Right.
They're both such high quality.
Fantastic.
Little boxes. I love them.
Is this the power supply?
That's just the power. Yeah,
Oh,
it
okay,
runs
cool.
this guy here.
Great.
And this is this old vintage piece of gear. It's called the CD player, and it's awesome. And I'm playing. You can see that I'm playing Green Day out of it right now. It's amazing.
CD player.
Yeah, it's
Compact.
It's gonna come back eventually. This, I know you've never seen these either. This is a tuner.
I have one of those sitting between my speakers as we speak.
So this is a unique tuner, though. This is a special tuner.
It's red.
It was
Mine's
red.
not red.
No,
Mine doesn't lay out red.
It's older. So
What's special?
I was working with a group called Pennywise, and Fletcher, the guitar player, says to me, he goes, "Where's your tuner? There's no tuner in your studio." I said, "Why don't you go buy me one?" So he literally drives his car to Guitar Center, comes back and puts this in my rack. And we finished that record, 2 months later. He's like, "I got to get all my gear." And he looked and he saw it and he goes, "That's a gift. I'm going to give you that one." So he gave that to me. So
Nice.
it's just my special
And
Fletcher.
it's red.
And it's red.
I don't know how you got. Yeah. Did he maybe sprayed it?
No, he had he cut himself, so he was bleeding, and he put the blood within the thing. That's what it is. That's what Fletcher would do, right, Fletcher?
So 436.
436. It's a great tube compressor. They're awesome. I don't know what to say. It's just you want that tube kind of like a stay level, but not quite as cool as a stay level. It has that grid, and you put a vocal through that, and it brings you to life. They're special. They're like.
Well, plus it's also a mic pre, isn't it? You just turn the frickin' thing up.
Yeah, because it's so hot. Like
Yeah,
that's the
so
thing.
hot.
Like that's as hot as I can go with it. If I was here,
Yeah.
it'd be blazing. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Pultec. What do you got the Pultec on? Anything?
Pultec. I don't use it as much as I should.
Sure.
It's great. I mean, here's the thing. The Trident bottom end is great. So do I need to go and get the 60 off of this when I get the same 60 off of that? Not necessarily. And you know, it's funny about these older pieces of gear. It's all tube. So when you run something through it, it changes the sound a little bit. Like it's not always like, it's not like these clean things where what you put in is exactly what you put out. It does something. So if you want a certain thing, you need to utilize it for that. You know what I mean? You can't say, I'm gonna put my kick drum through there, because it might actually roll off some of the bottom end. And then you're like, whoa, hold on, you gotta fix it and tweak it back up. Or whatever it does. Or if you're hitting it too hard, it's actually gonna start to distort a little bit because it's a tube compressor. So you gotta find your right way with it. But it's like the Pultecs in the computer, I like as well. I mean, this came from the old school, like 90s, like you gotta put your kick drum through the Pultec, put your bass through the Pultec. And that's kind of when I got interested in using it. And yeah.
First time I ever really used Pultecs in America was with my Clink. And that was always the 60. Boom. But all the attenuations way. Always focus it and boost it. And
Yep.
There you go. There was your kick drum sound.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So what we got going on here, this is a lot of information here, people, with 2 VU meters.
So basically, look at this is 2 compressors. This is 1 compressor, and this is 2 compressors.
It's the hi-hat. Hi-hat and shaker. No,
so this is the equivalent to a stay level. These were built in, I believe, 1951. And in 1951, they were making things like the stay levels. They were making the Fairchilds. They were making other Altec compressors and BA6As. All those compressors are this same design. They're using the same kind of circuitry, the same kind of tubes. If you look in the back, it's just tubes everywhere. Like one's a power supply, one's all the tubes, one's the control surface or whatever. So these are those like like your Johnny Cash moment. I was talking about how there's that stay level sound. That's what this does. Now this thing doesn't work great on everything, but the things it works good on, it's brilliant. Like, you can't replicate it with anything in these boxes that we have. Like, it definitely, this one distorts a little bit, and they're different. This one's hotter than this one. So they're like, I have to choose what I want to use it for. And it's one of those things you have to choose, because if you have someone who's a picky, if there's a guitar player and I really want my tone, you can't use stuff like this, because this creates a new tone. This this is going to distort it. This is going to be a compressor that's very intense, but they're awesome.
I love it says plate current.
Yeah, it's not even, so check it out. This was made by the military. It was not made by a company. So back in the day, the military was making a lot of our compressors and microphones, because they were using it for submarines or using it for PA systems. So this was probably on a PA system somewhere, like on a submarine, or who knows where it was. Well, I guess it was Army, so it would be a submarine. But but they were making these things, and I actually have the original manuals for these things. And they're
number one, number two.
Exactly. A and B right there. So I didn't put that stuff there. That's been there since whoever knows when. And even here, it tells you your release times based off of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So someone had put that on there.
Wow, it's so amazing.
But yeah, it's cool.
I love all that stuff. I love all the military things.
Fun stuff.
Now let's have a quick peek in here. What's cool?
Okay, what I was telling Warren here is that one nice thing about the studio is there's a back room right here, and through this room I have access to all this gear. So if there were to be something wrong with it, something were to go out, unscrew it, unplug it, it's really easy to access. As opposed to a lot of studios are racks in these cabinets, and you have to dig it out, and then you got to pull these cables and all this stuff. Right here, you can see it all. It's very
that's fantastic.
Organized. It's awesome.
That's all around the back there.
But this is my holy grail right here. This is my Fairchild-esque compressor. This is an Altec 322C. Let me tell you a little story about this compressor. It used to sit in a church in downtown Los Angeles, and it sat there since it was built, which I believe it was built in the 50s. I don't know exactly. It sat in this church upstairs, and the sermon would go through this for like 40 years. And at the time, I worked at a studio called Larrabee Sound, and the tech there said, hey, they're getting rid of this Altec compressor and this other thing. Do you want it? And I'm like, yes, I want it. What do I need to do? And they're like, well, you need to just donate some money. So I donated some money to some church, and because they were going to throw it away. And they gave it to me. Now, the key was it had an Altec console too. And the tech said, well, I want the console. And the console and this use the same power supply. And I'm like, so I get a compressor without a power supply? He's like, yep, you do. He goes, but I'm going to tell you something. A year or two ago, you brought in this weird contraption with tubes, which was actually a mono power supply from the 40s that your grandpa had built. And I'd never met my grandfather because he passed away before I was born. And he said, I bet you I can make it into a power supply. So what he did, he made it a power supply for this. So there's a tube power supply running this tube amp. And these, like, I compare it to like those, the Stay Levels and the Fairchilds and the BA6As. That's where it came from, that era of time. But it's unique. It's different than a Fairchild. It has this smoothness of release and attack. It's a limiter, and it's like a 10-to-1 limiter is what the specs say. But you park a vocal on it, and you're hitting it pretty hard, and it doesn't suck the life out of it. It actually adds more life and more like I was talking about before, length to the sound. Like the sound, the voice lasts longer. And that's why this thing is so special. And all the early Motörhead records, Social Distortion, Pennywise, every single one of them went through this box here, because it just is phenomenal. And it does everything great. It's like butter. It's so awesome. I love it to death. So,
beautiful. It looks amazing.
Yeah, it's one of my prized possessions. I love it.
And then this was the thing I was asking about earlier that I have never seen, I actually have never heard of. Sorry for everybody who's going to say, duh. But apparently this is a Philips tape delay. Is that correct?
It's a Philips tape delay, and it's pretty wild. It has all these heads here, and what it does is it's like your old school tape delay, but what it has, because it has multiple heads, what you do is you pop this off. And I believe this one, is this the record head or the play? I don't know. One of them is the record head and one's the play head. And what happens is all these heads, you can unscrew it with here. There's a little tool, and the tool sits in the back. And it's basically an Allen wrench, or maybe it sits in front somewhere. I don't know. I can't find it right now. but you can move these around so your delay time is different delays depending on where you put them. So you could take this one and put it here, it's gonna be a very fast delay. You put this one here, it's very slow. So when they're like this, they kind of create a reverb sound as opposed to a delay when they're so bunched together. But what you can do is on the console, it's got 4 different outputs. So you can actually push them up on a fader and you can say, oh, I want a long delay, I want a short delay, and you can move it around. Now the key to this is, nowadays, it just takes a lot of time because if you want to unscrew it and move it around, it's not like up there on the computer where you're moving your delay time and you're done. Like this is a experimental thing, and it obviously has like settings and stuff, but it's kind of complicated. And the cool thing too is it's very grainy. It's kind of dirty in a cool way. It's got an old 70s grain to it.
If the tape breaks, can you get out the tape?
I just make tape.
You do?
Yeah, I make this. This is not the original tape. Yeah, I just basically put new pieces together, and I have a couple extra just lying around.
Okay,
so
great.
yeah, it's just a circle is all it is, and yeah, and it's so it's cool. All tube. There's like, I think there's like 40 tubes in the back.
Oh, it's massive. Insane. I don't know if we can get it all on camera, but yeah, it's a huge piece of. Yeah, Eric will get some stills as we're talking. Yeah, it's woo.
And you can smell it too. Like whenever you turn it on, you smell tubes burning, and in a good way. Like so, it's just a cool little box. It's very unique. Like I might only use this twice a year, but the 2 times I use it, it'll be for something really cool.
I love it has treble and bass controls.
I know, it's pretty cool.
Now some quad 8s down there.
Quad 8s, great EQ. They're like a Neve EQ. They're really smooth. They're one of those things where you turn it there and you hardly notice. You turn it here, it's good. You turn it there, it's not too aggressive. It's not too bitey. It's a very smooth 70s-esque kind of nice. EQ. I love them. They're great. They're very simple. You want a little bit of punch on your bottom, you just crank that up a little bit. Right. It's different than our modern EQs, and if you feel them, they have steps. So when there's steps, they feel more like it's like strong.
It makes recallability so much easier.
Oh yeah, that too. It's like
what's this down the bottom? Is that for the quad 8?
Nah. So these are mic pre's. These are 8 mic pre's.
Oh, they are.
I had a friend of mine. His name's Mike, and he had built these for me, and they're kind of like a replica of like an API. Oh. But they're different. Like sometimes if you want like that mid-rangey kind of mic pre, it's pretty extreme. Yeah. You put that on, you're like, wow, that's exactly what I want. I want it to sound more 70s and mid-rangey. So you pop that in and it does it. So it's very simple. It's kind of Frankensteined.
Talking to tape delays, you got an Space Echo up there?
Love the Space Echo. Works great. It's unique. It does its own thing, so you can't use it for everything. Like a lot of my gear, it's like I'll be working, I'll be like, that's the Space Echo. So I'll grab the Space Echo and put it down and I'll do that. Or that's this. And it doesn't work great for everything, but it works amazing for certain things. Guitar players love that. They're awesome. It's
inspiring to just have something you can play with the knobs on it.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
All right, we briefly touched on the Lemmy amp. Tell us more about the beautiful Lemmy amp. Did you say this is the reissue of the original one that he had?
So, yeah, I'm not sure the exact date, maybe 10 years ago or so, Lemmy went to Marshall and said, I want to make my own Marshall head based off of my head that I love. And his head that he loves is called Marsha. It's Marsha without the L's.
Right.
And he's had it forever. He bought this amp, and if you ever see pictures of it, it has a Sex Pistols, never mind the Bullocks sticker on it.
Oh, nice.
From 1977 or whatever year that record came out. He put the sticker on there, and it's still on there to this date. It's messed up, but you can see it.
Nice.
So he went to them and said, hey, I want to replicate my Super Bass 100 on a modern amp. So they basically, Marshall came to him and said, let's build this for you. So they built this amp for him, and it doesn't sound exactly like that, but it has a cool sound. It's definitely, he plugs the bass into it. You can plug guitar into it too. It's a great guitar amp. It's a great bass amp all around, but that was a specific amp that he did. And this one actually belongs to him. This was one that he played on stage. Nice. And if you look up here, it still has his name, and it was number 2. So it's number 2 on that stage. And
beautiful.
And I borrow that from the Motörhead people, and then eventually give it back. And
what's this?
These are just emblems that he liked, that he wanted on there. So
nice.
He had those put on. And then I'm going to screw up this story because I don't know it that well, but see how there's a red little piece there?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
So when he had one of those first Marshall amps, I don't remember if it was he had that amp, and it had 3 black corners, but it was missing another corner. So he ended up having another one there was a red Marshall, and he put that piece on there. So his original Marshall actually had that, and you can see it in photos, like really old photos, where you see one is off. And I believe and that's why he said, hey, we got to put that little trick on
That's a
there
great
too,
idea.
to make it unique, because everything he did was always unique to what
I
he
remember,
was doing.
I don't remember, it wasn't the Jubilee series, obviously was 25 years, and that was the silver one. But I do know in the 70s they did all of the different color ones. So that's what it would have been.
Yeah.
I don't remember which year. Please leave comments and questions below. I don't remember what year it is, but yes, I do remember they would do like red ones and yellow ones and cream ones. And
Yeah.
so that would be, yeah, I know exactly what
That
you're
would
saying.
be why that was there.
Yeah,
exactly.
great. Fantastic. And then the 800, is that yours?
So you know what's funny when you have a studio is, and I've seen this on your other interviews, is some amps don't belong to you because people leave them. Because I've always told people, if you want to leave an amp here, I'll make sure it's retubed, it's clean, it works great. And when you want to take it back on the road, there you go, take your amp back. And this is a friend of mine, he's in a band called Strung Out. His name's Rob. And we did a record here years ago, and he left it, and it was in terrible shape. There was so much dirt and grit in it that we could hardly use it. So I had it all fixed up, and then he said, "I'll just leave it there for now. When I need it, I'll come get it." So it's one of those amps where it's a great amp. Here's the funny thing: Rob gets mad when I talk about this. I actually love to run bass through this amp. It sounds phenomenal. It's like the
Makes
early
sense to me.
70s Marshalls, where if you want just a grit and just this edge to it, that gives it an awesome edge. So I'll use that for guitar as well as bass, and that's why this is kind of my bass corner. Like those things, if you want, you switch them out really easy, and that's, to me, when you're in the studio, you want to be able to change things really fast. Like, hey, you want this Marshall? Cool. No, you want this one? Jump to that one. And
so because you said it on camera at the beginning, what is the Lemmy setting?
So Lemmy, he hated bass. So the bass was always turned all the way down. The mid range, he would turn on 10.
Yeah.
The treble was all the way down. The presence, he normally would park at about 2 o'clock or so.
Right.
And then depending on how loud and how much grit we wanted, we would turn this up based off of that. So that was, it's funny, when I first started working with him, I walked in the door and I totally set up his amp wrong. And he looked at me and goes, "This is how you set it up." And he hit all the knobs like this. And 12 years later, he was still hitting the knobs the same way. So
awesome. And you did that where you'd jump the two
so obviously
channels?
You jump this so you can have a hotter gain to the to the whole thing, and it gives a little kind of different distortion when you do that, as opposed to keep turning up the amp. It's distorting, but this is more like a modern distortion when you're jumping it, and then you're using the second volume as another gain knob.
That's fantastic.
It's cool. And that's the thing. I like things that are over the top, and these amps are over the top when you treat them that way.
What were you getting volume-wise? Was he cranking it pretty heavily, or?
It just depends. I mean, this one, I don't remember. I think you didn't need to go. I mean, sometimes you're around there, but you didn't need to go there. It would just, at this point, it doesn't do as much. It's just, it depended on the day. You know, I mean.
I must say, this feels really well made.
Oh, it's really smooth.
Really well made. Very expensive pots.
In general, like the Motörhead stuff, we usually used his Marsha, another one called Hammer, another one called Freight Shaker. He had names for all of his amps. And if you looked at the amps, that's what they would say. And this was always in there, and sometimes we'd plug it in, but the meat of the records, we didn't use this as much. I mean, it definitely got used a couple times for sure.
Right.
But it's with amps, you want a diversity. You want someone to walk in the door and say, "I'm searching for this sound." Right. And their amp doesn't have that sound. So you say, "Well, how about this one?" And you give them options of different sounds.
That's amazing. Now, I like these. I think these are pretty darn usable. I know a lot of people that use these.
You know what's funny about these? It's a modern piece of gear. It's line 6, and people kind of talk. That's not so good. They're amazing.
They're amazing.
They're so easy.
Yeah.
I was working with POD 2 weeks ago, and I was getting a scratch bass so we could track. I plugged this in, I did 2 settings, and he listened to his tone. He goes, "Whoa," he goes, "What did you do? What amps you running through?" I'm like, "I'm running through this." And he goes, "I love that sound. Let's just keep it." Yeah. So I use this for my DI a lot of times because it's great. It's easy and it's fun, and it's better than a DI.
You know, Dave Jordan, I wish I could remember this top of my head. He used to use a thing that was red called the Night Bass.
Okay.
Was it ART or one of those kind of companies, or it wasn't Zoom, but it was one of those kind of companies, and that was a big part of his, like, Alice in Chains gritty bass tone.
Wow.
Again, digital, not tube, not this. It's like,
you know what's funny about what we do is we're snobs. I'm a total snob about all this gear and the things that I have and I do. But when something works, it doesn't matter how it got there. Like I've used Mackies and gotten a great mix out of a Mackie. And other times I've looked at it and gone like, "Oh, I can't touch a Mackie." But things like this, they can be brilliant at what they do, and they can save you so much time and effort. And like
Mhm.
like I love my tube amps and all that kind of stuff, but some days that's fine. And a lot of times this is going to give you a cleaner sort of pristine sound.
Yeah, I think especially for distortion stuff, you've got a lot more choice where traditional amps, they distort in a one way and they sound great, but if it's not what you want, I mean, here you've got,
I know.
goodness knows how many different presets that you can get distortions. The Motor City.
That's the one. Okay, this is the one I'm on right now. The Rock Classic works great. So, but yeah, that's what I think. It's like, and you know what? And it's about having fun. Like it's about like plugging this in, and the bass player of POD, superstars. Like I love that tone.
God, it's called a bass pod, best bass POD. There you go.
Yeah, maybe that's why. But it's so exciting that it worked, and they're like, it doesn't matter that it's not the most expensive thing. It's like it's cool. It works.
No, this is great. And as a guitar player, when that what was it called? I've got it, the green echo pedal.
Yeah. I don't know what it's called.
Amp Farm, or Pod Farm. That's the plug-in version.
The rack mounted one or the pedal?
No, the actual pedal, the green
pedal.
pedal.
Yeah, those are great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And especially when you've got 4 pedals.
Yeah.
And it's simulating 10 different delay pedals.
Yeah.
Like I'm really going to have a tape delay and a this delay and a that delay.
Those are great delays.
Yeah, really, really cool stuff. So Bassman?
Bassman's awesome. So I worked on a couple social distortion records.
Right.
And Mike Ness, this is not his, he plays the blackface ones. And he would take them and he would turn them up. And I was like, this sounds great. Like it has this grit and this aliveness that tubes have. And that's what this amp does. Now this amp is a little different because a normal Bassman you can get kind of clean. But I took this to a guy named Billy Zoom. Do you know who Billy Zoom is?
No.
He's the guitar player for X.
Oh, right. No, I know. Yeah.
So X is a great punk rock band. And what he does, he does this X, well, not X mod. He does a Billy Zoom mod. And it's a hot rodded, super
So I was thinking
distorted
Billy Zoom, there's a tech called Billy
No,
Zoom.
no,
I realize he did his own.
The guitar player.
He does his own stuff.
The guitar player is like, yeah, he can totally build, work with amps, and he has a recording studio, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just a Billy Zoom mod. And
what's the drummer called?
I don't know the drummer.
Oh, because he does sessions around LA.
Okay.
He's amazing.
Oh yeah.
You think of X as like this punk band, you know.
No, they're good.
They're amazing musicians.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. That song, LA, the Los Angeles song.
Los Angeles.
Amazing song.
Los Angeles.
Great band.
Yeah, no, great band. Yeah, I'm blanking on the name of the drummer, but he came in and did a couple of sessions with me back in like the late 90s when I first got my start.
Wow.
Because he was recommended.
Yeah.
And he was, probably shouldn't say this on camera, I think he was like $100. And he came in for a couple of hours and playing like 3 or 4 songs. And he was just like amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's more expensive now.
But that whole band was really good.
But you know, it's just like you can get like great local musicians to come in. And especially when I think about it, we're going off one of my famous tangents. What I love about that is like the fact that sort of sense of community, especially like, because I was like a 20-something snotty kid in reality. Maybe I had an English accent. But here's a guy who was probably late 30s, early 40s and coming in and, oh yeah, you got $100? That's fine. I'll just come in and play on a few songs.
Yeah.
And it's like suddenly my confidence comes up, my resume grows.
Yeah.
You know, it's good. It's those kind of moments that,
yeah,
you know, it's all part of what we're doing here. Giving back is
It's funny. So I was working on a session. I don't want to tell who the session was, but Josh Fries was coming to a session with me, and I was the engineer. I wasn't the producer, and I had to do another track for Lemmy and a friend of his, but I needed a drummer for it. So you were talking about sometimes people do favors for you.
Sure.
So I called Josh the night before. I said, "Listen, I'm just going to ask you. If you say no, we're totally cool. But I just need to know this. We're going to do our session. You're going to get paid what you get paid. But could we do another session right after that, and I'll pay you this sum of money?" It wasn't a lot, but he goes, yeah, let's do it. So what happened was we did the session. We finished the session, and Josh says, "Well, guys, I got to go." So Josh leaves. And then I call Josh and I say, "All right, just go get a coffee and I'll see you in 10 minutes. And then when the band, I hate this, I shouldn't say this, but so the band leaves and take off. 10 minutes later, I call Josh. Josh runs back in the door, says, "All right, let's go." We tracked the other song and we did the other song. So it's one of those things where like, as a musician, you want to make a living at this, and you can't always make a living the normal way. Sometimes you have to, we weren't doing anything wrong. Everyone was getting paid. Everyone got the products they wanted. And it's like the old school ways where people would do multiple sessions in a day. But I didn't want to offend the first band and think that there was any reason why they weren't as important as the second artist. So it was one of those things where I was like, I'm going to separate them. I'm going to send Josh away. Josh is going to come back reinvigorated, and then we're going to track. And we tracked that thing, did it in a couple takes, and then he left. He went home, and we were in good shape. So,
well, and plus he's looking after you.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yep.
He loves what he's
building
doing.
Relationships.
Yeah, he's building relationships, and for someone like him, he's a superstar. He's been an amazing drummer forever, and now it's like, for someone like me, it's like I feel like I'm always coming up. Whether you do big or small records, you're always trying to keep growing and build relationships. And I have a lot of respect for the artists he's worked with and who he was and what he's done. So for me, it was a special thing. It was like, yeah, wow. He's like, he came back and we did this.
I did an album with I can't remember, I think it was a Japanese, we're talking a long time ago, 15 years ago, an album with a Japanese artist, and they hired him for a day to come in and play on the record. And I think he probably did it in 4 hours.
Insane.
But it didn't feel like he was rushing.
Yeah.
It just felt like he came in, he listened to the song, he took some notes, he played the parts, he did 2 or 3 takes, we moved on. It just felt relaxed.
Yeah.
Go in, 2 or 3 takes is 15 minutes a song.
Yeah.
You do 10 songs.
There's a reason why he was so unique. It's because when I brought him in, I played him the song. He listened to the song once, and he listened. Then the second time, he said, "Can I listen to it one more time?" He listened again. He took a couple little notes, and then he just walked in the room. And I'm like, "Do you need to warm up or anything?" He's like, "No." So obviously, I always hit record no matter what. I never hit play. I hit record. And he does the first take, and I'm like, I mean, that could be done. I'm like, give me another couple. And then he would do other ones, and there would just be a little variety in it. But he's one of those people that he never played to the song, but he just knew what the song was by taking his notes and stuff. And that's why he saved a lot of people a lot of time, especially when he was doing when he still does those sessions. He's like, he saves you time and money because he's paying attention and he's good. Sure. He's smart, very smart guy.
And he's a savant. That's what he does.
Yeah.
That's his whole life.
Yeah, and he's entertaining too.
Yeah,
he's
definitely.
Fun. Good stories.
Well, look, so we've got
Well, so we're going back into bass world. They're fairly close, but this is my normal bass amps. This is not my distorted bass amp. And you know what? People talk about the different amp pegs, and you got to have the B6 and whatever. I've used them all, and this amp sounds great. I've compared this to the fancy retro ones, and you know what? For a deep, full, warm sound, going to an SVT in the other room, it's awesome. It's a great one. And any of the amp peg stuff is always, it's top notch.
Are you going to an 810?
Always go to 810. Yep.
Any particular mic you like on it?
Yeah, I use this. It's the D12 VR. No, it's those newer D12s. The D12 VR, amazing. So full. You can scoop it. It has this little button you press to scoop the mid-range out. Phenomenal mic. One of my favorite mics. I use it on the outside kick drum. I use it there. It's mind blowing. It's great.
Nice. I have an original D12. It seems to have taken a bit of a died recently. And I did read that they were reissuing them. And this is the AKG D12 we're talking about.
Yes, great mic.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So you use that on the 810?
I'll use that on, and you know what, here's the thing. If an artist comes in, they've got their own amp, we set it up there and we use it. If an artist says, I don't have anything, I'll plug this thing in. I also have a Gallion Kruger if someone wants that, which sounds great too. So it's just a matter of what someone wants, and just simple.
And then what's the Mesa here?
So this is another one of those stories where I have friends. This actually belongs to Fletcher from Pennywise, and it's a rack-mounted dual rectifier. These things are amazing. I believe these are way better than the triple rectifiers and all that stuff. They're more focused. They've got, this is great for your dirty as can be sound, whether it's metal or punk. This thing is awesome. It's a killer amp. Another one of those things where Fletcher he was leaving it here. I took care of it. I even broke some tubes once, put new ones in right away. And I always say, Fletcher, you need it, it's there. It's like, well, and it doesn't need it to be on the road because this one could break pretty easily. And sitting in a rack, it's going to last for a long time.
That's great.
And then, so these are little toys I have. This is the Sonic Maximizer. And the Sonic Maximizer, it's a cool little trick for putting on clean guitars, putting on bass. It has its own little gain and its own bottom end thing. It's just one of those weird niche things where you're just searching for a sound and you want to make something a little unique, and you plug that thing in, and it's just one of those extra things where I might only use it 5 times a year or whatever it is. But but it's just that magic moment.
What are these?
I love these things.
I don't know what they are.
They're called PCP Labs. they make it's a drug. It's PCP, whatever. They're basically they're compressor pedals for like a guitar. So this would be like an old school guitar pedal, but it's a compressor pedal. So it's like your Keeley compressors and things like that. But it's great, and it's awesome for clean guitars or things like that, where you want to hit the amp with your actually compression. So you're compressing your guitar before you're getting to an amp. That's what they are. So on the back, there's just an in and an output, and very simple. But I found them randomly, paid $50 for them, whatever. They're awesome.
They look great.
Yeah, they're totally fun.
Excellent. Now, a couple of other amps sitting over here.
So because I do a lot of heavy records, I need heavy amps. And both of these, so when you have bands that are detuning, when you detune and you play through a Marshall, you don't get the fullness of sound. You don't get this wideness of a bottom end. When you plug in like a Bogner, it just handles the detuning so well, whether it's D or even a couple steps below that. These things they hold the weight. They don't flop out.
Right.
But the key to these things, at least my key is running it with the Bogner cab that goes along with it.
Oh, I see.
It sounds good with other cabs, but the Bogner cab and this head together, it has great bottom end and all the grit that you need. So they're just amazing. This is a funny amp because my friend Roger owned it, and I borrowed it for probably 9 years, and it sat here for like 9 years. And one day he came to me and says, "Cameron, I got to sell the amp." He goes, "I need some money." And I said, "Well, I've kind of owned it for the last 9 years. I'll just buy it from you." So I ended up buying it from him. And the best thing about like a lot of things I buy, and when I buy things, is if you can use something for 10 years and realize you love that sound and what it is, then that's what you should buy. There's no reason why I should have said, "Hey, Roger, sell it to someone else. I'm going to go buy another Bogner." What if that Bogner doesn't sound exactly like this one? Then you're just like,
I think I may have made that mistake recently.
Yeah,
I think I let an amp go that I've used to using.
Don't let it go.
Yeah, I did make that mistake.
Try not to. That's the thing with me. When I collect something, I just keep it. And whether I use it a lot, I want to have the options, because you never know when you can't always just buy amps. Like if you can get one, you keep it. And if you can get it for cheap, you definitely get it for cheap, and you keep it as long as you can.
I love the look of this Saldana. Look at that. It's like industrial.
It's a great head. I bought this from a friend of mine who's in a band called Zebrahead, and they were endorsed by Saldana for a long time. And when he left the band, he wanted to get rid of some stuff. And this was the same thing. I'd had this in my studio for 2 years, and he's like, "Why don't you just buy it from me?" And I'm like, "Well, I love the color. It's green. Let's do it." Like it's
green, sparkles, and it feels like it's built to like a tank.
And it complements this because it's got a bit more low mids than this sort of thing does. This is more hot rodded, but it's still very aggressive distortion, and
wonderful.
It goes on 10, and it's a great amp. Love this amp.
What is this?
So there's another one. This belongs to Fletcher again. So some guy in Hollywood, I don't even know who he was making amplifiers out of these old TV things. So basically, this is like a Marshall amplifier. You plug this into a half stack, you plug the speaker cable in there, and it can run a Marshall cabinet, this little box. And it's unique. I think, I believe Joe Barresi has one of these, or he at least used these before. They did a record with Joe Barresi, and I think that's where he got introduced to it. But it does its one thing good, and everything else it does terrible. So it doesn't blow up when you turn it on. And the cool thing is, you could plug a guitar in right now, and there's a speaker here that it will play out of. So you can just play out of the speaker, or you plug the Marshall in, and you can play out of the Marshall.
That's awesome.
It's fun.
And it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was an amp.
It is an amp,
What is that crazy looking thing? All right, so we were about to walk through to the studio, but I wanted to stop because I'm a guitar player and I love pedals. You got some fun stuff here. So you have original Tube Screamer.
Yes. So basically what I do is I like, when a band comes in, obviously they bring in their own gear a lot of times, but sometimes they just don't have things. And I'm the kind of producer where if someone says, "Hey, Cameron, I want this sound," I don't sit there and say, well, we don't really have that. I'll say, let's make it. And we'll create it with, whether it's distortions or delays or all these different units. Well, I'm there to please the artist. I'm there for an artist to be free and to be experimental. And that's like, for a guitar player, this is the way to do it. You just throw stuff at them like, hey, you can play anything, plug anything you want in.
Well, I'm a guitar player, and there's two of my favorite things here, but I don't know what this is. What is it?
It's like a custom-made distortion that some kid made, and they gave it to a band called Zebrahead, and he left one of them here.
It's got Yahoo Mail.
Yeah.
So it's, you get a close-up of that. So people email him at Yahoo Mail.
Yeah, it's a great distortion. It's really fun. We use it on bass a lot.
This is one of my personal
That's your
favorite
favorite.
pedals.
Yeah.
This thing.
Those are great. Simple.
Yeah.
And
My personal favorite guitar sounds is Telecaster Distortion Plus AC30.
Yeah.
Crank it, drive the amp hard, sounds amazing. Yeah, I just think it's dumb. It's built like a frickin' brick schnizzle house. I mean, it's, you know, same with the Phase 90. I mean, it's instant Van Halen. Nice slow sweep. It's just got that sound.
Yeah. But see, this is my favorite right here. The old school.
I have one of those too. Yeah.
The Big Muff. It's like it's so awesome. And this is another one too. It's an older version, but that one just has a charm to it and a smoothness. I love it.
Sovtek, isn't it? The Russian one.
Yeah, that's the Russian one.
It's great. I don't know what this is. I mean, I know it's a Boss, and I know it's obviously more modern, but I've never actually used one. Turbo distortion.
Yeah, you know what? Some amps some pedals you don't use as much, and some you just do. I don't have a story for that one. It's what it is.
The DS1 is one of the best distortion pedals ever made. So it looks like that's what this is, a DS1, and then it just has this. It looks like a pedal, so you can turn it on and off if you want to like go to solo. It's the turbo. You press it on, extra distortion.
Ah.
Yeah, the DS1 is the Gary Moore pedal,
which
is like exactly the same as this without that extra knob, and I love that's one of my favorite. As a kid, the OD1, the Boss Overdrive, which is the yellow color, just wasn't rock enough for me.
Yeah.
And then I read that Gary Moore used the DS1 into a Marshall. I saved my money up, eventually bought one, and it's a big step up. There's some fun stuff. Oh yeah, full tones, some original full tones.
Full tones are awesome.
Yeah.
The blue one, this is the magic one. This is the more expensive, fancier one.
Yeah.
This is the one though. People come in here all the time and be like, "Oh, I got to plug that in." It's a smooth distortion, very simple. It's great.
Wow, 1998.
Yeah.
Only 20 years old. Shag.
That was the old studio we had.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then what is that? A Weeping Demon? I presume it's a wah pedal.
It's an amazing wah pedal. It destroys most wah pedals.
Ibanez Weeping Demon.
Yeah, it's great. Bought on the Pennywise record as well because Fletcher said I need something over the top, and we went to Guitar Center. How about the Weeping Demon? There it is.
That's awesome.
It's great.
The Dan Electro Real Echo, presumably it's like a tape simulator.
It's like a tape similar delay. It's great. It's awesome. It's full. It's similar to a tape. That's what it is.
Dime distortion, is this dime bag, or is it just happen to be called dime?
I think it's just called dime. I don't know. So some pedals here, sometimes I work with a lot of artists that, I hope that the artists I work with are going to be lifers and do it the rest of their lives. And sometimes I work with people who eventually say, you know what, I just don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Either take this stuff or, hey, buy some of this stuff for me. And that's where some of these pedals come from. Like these ones specifically, the kid just didn't want to play guitar anymore. And I said, hey, just have these, Cameron, they're yours. And because over the years, like as a producer, you do a lot of favors for people and you help people out. Like bands say, hey, I've got no money, but I need to do this one song. Maybe I'll get a deal. And you do that. You spend 2 days and you actually lose money. And then occasionally some kid will come back and be like, hey, you know what? Remember those days? I appreciate it. Here you go.
Nice.
We're good. We're even. So it's just nice to build those relationships.
Absolutely, I agree. I love this TC Electronics shaker.
Yep.
Vibrato pedal.
Good little box.
So these two we were just talking about are down electrodes called the black paisley and the blue paisley.
Yes.
What is the blood drive there?
Blood drive.
It just looks so cool.
There's a producer named Jay Baumgartner, and he owns a company called Coffin Case. And this is one of the pedals they have, and this is a phenomenal bass distortion. This is like, if you want a Lemmy sound, but just through like your regular Ampeg, you plug this thing in there and you get that distortion. It's
nice.
Not a Marshall, but it's that same bite. It's amazing. Yeah, you gotta try this out. You'll love it.
Now you have one of the. Do
you know this guy?
Yeah, I do, and this is worth a lot of money.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh yes, it's a Maestro fuzz tone. That's quite a valuable little thing these days.
My favorite thing about this is that it's like a Big Muff. It's basically a Big Muff, but depending on where you press this, it can put the clean signal through and the distortion signal through, and you can blend them. So you're getting a little bit of clean, and you're also getting a Big Muff. So it's weird. It's like you're running a clean amp with a Big Muff at the same time. It's great, and it's built like it's like it clicks. Like, and this button is for your foot to turn.
The Maestro fuzz tone.
These things it's insane.
Yeah, no, this is great.
Yeah, good little box.
Yeah, this is really nice.
Built like a tank.
Oh yeah, very nice indeed. Oh, the Keeleys, yeah, great. Obviously great.
Great
pedals.
compressor pedals, yeah.
Yeah, really,
Love
really
'em.
beautiful. More Dan Electros. Oh, the whammy pedal.
You gotta use, I mean, the whammy's great. Motörhead, we used to use whammy a lot. He would, not as the whammy, but to do the lower octave.
Right.
So we'd get these heavier, sort of like more heavy metal sort of sounds.
On the bass or on the guitars?
On the guitars.
On the guitars.
We do that. And sometimes we'd plug it in and we'd be like, we don't even need bass now. And then Lemmy would come and be like, nah, get rid of that pedal.
This is, I had one of these for years. CE2. Beautiful.
This is the first pedal I ever got when I was 14. Someone wanted me to play bass in their band, and I didn't play bass. And they handed me this pedal, a bass, and an amp. And they said, we want you to play bass. So I've had it ever since.
That's such a
great pedal.
Great pedal. And then Crybaby, of course.
Crybaby's always.
And then the last couple of things are the acoustic exciter. Oh, Aphex.
These are great. It's a great DI, and you know what's awesome about these? It's a DI, but with the EQ, so you can EQ your bass, and they're just great little boxes.
Fantastic.
Simple.
What's last but no means least? What is hanging out here? What's this?
So this is really special. You want to see this? You can plug a guitar in it, or it works with light. So if you take the light away, it changes the sound. But if I go towards the light, so this gets really annoying really fast. Like it seems like it's fun right now. But I don't know how to turn it off. There we go. It's terrible. Like some days I should not have that thing.
Nice. Then we've got some DIs and stuff lurking around back there. Oh, you got one of Rob Brill's things.
Yes, right. Rob. I've been meaning to give that back to him.
I've
got two. I'm like, Rob.
You got two. Hey, Rob.
You need to come pick this
Rob.
up. I've had that forever.
All right, let's check out the live room.
Okay.
Rob, God.
So Rob, here's the funny thing about Rob. Rob and I met at the first Coachella, and at the first Coachella, we were hired to record stages, and we were both part of the recording crew, and that's where I first met him. And I think he used my studio a couple years later,
right?
And he must have forgot that. So, sorry, Rob.
Maybe you'll remember now.
Now you remember if you watch it, Rob. You know where I'm at.
Hey, so let's do some guitars, things I'm a guitar player.
Okay.
You go, is this a studio?
You tell me.
I think it's a Les Paul studio.
It's a great guitar. You know what? I don't have a ton of guitars here, and the reason why is because most players come in and they're very particular with what they play and their own thing. This might be the best guitar in the world, but it's not theirs, so they might not want to pick it up.
Right. I understand.
But it's a great sounding guitar. It sounds full and big and round.
And this we were talking about when I was walking through the studio and we couldn't remember what the actual model was.
So whenever anyone walks in the door, they always think it's a Junior, and it's not a Junior because Juniors had one pickup, and
right.
It was a special model they made in like '65, and this is a reissue of it from the '90s. But it just got it gives you more of a Green Day kind of sound. It's got a good just
P90s on it,
crunch to it. It's like
it's beautiful looking.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's a good guitar.
Very nice indeed. And then a nice P bass here. That looks pretty old.
So this is a '70s one. This is late '70s, and this doesn't belong to me as well. This belongs to my friend Randy from Pennywise, and I was borrowing it one day, and he played on a record. He says, "Well, why don't you just keep it here for a little while?"
Nice.
And he didn't want it on tour because he doesn't want it to get ruined. So he said, "Oh, right. I'll call you, and when I need it, I'll come pick it up." And so it's like whenever we need a P bass, we plug this thing in. It's amazing. It's great. Great sound.
What's the Neumann power supply for?
A 149.
A 149.
Yep.
Great. Hammond. What's the whirly? Sorry.
It's just a crazy whirly. You know what? I also have friends that don't want things anymore, so they come by and they say, "I don't want this organ anymore." And I'm like, "Well, it's an instrument. It's fun, and it's got a drum machine too." So.
And there you go.
That's about as much as it gets played. Yeah, it's more for fun, because the studio's for people to be creative and do stupid stuff.
But I love that it has a cassette recorder here.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yep. So you can record your ideas.
Yep. Incredible.
I can record my songs.
Why didn't they build that into amps?
I don't know.
Years ago.
I know.
Who knows?
So your drum kit here.
So it's it's kind of piecemeal, this drum kit right
Yeah.
now. I have a friend who has this DW that normally sits here, and the kick drum's in the other room.
Right.
But I recently was working with a band called The Last Gang, and
Yep.
The Last Gang, he brought this kick pedal in. And I was like, I love this. This is an amazing Gretsch. So
Oh, it's got a lot of bottom end.
I'm fortunate he's left it for me. Not let. I mean, he's gonna take it back, but he let me use it for a couple records, and it's just like I said, you do a favor and they do a favor back. So it's awesome. This is a U drum. It's a cool drum. My favorite drum is this Black Beauty. Black Beauties are always dear to my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have Audio Technicas on the toms.
Black Beauty.
Beautiful.
Good Black Beauty.
It's gorgeous. So you have ATM 25s on the toms, which are great mics.
ATM 25s, one of my favorite mics.
Yeah.
They're amazing on kick drums, on toms.
Have you got like a little? You build like a little shield for the hi hat for the guys that smash the.
Everyone I work with smashes everything. So like over the years, I'm always trying to find a new way, and this was just a quick fix.
No, I hear you.
I don't have a great solution yet, and I know there's those little things you can buy, and I got to try those out.
Yeah, the great solution is to try and get the guy not to hit the hi hat as hard. They hit the snare harder.
See, I agree, but I did. When I'm producing records, I like people to
I understand.
like a lot of the artists I work
free
with.
them and
a lot of the artists, like if you wouldn't tell Keith Moon to simplify things, and I look at those kids as being Keith Moon. Now, if I need to do something pop and more organized, then I'm going to say, hey guys, you need to just lay back a little bit. But
well, the other thing I've been doing a lot of over the years, and I'm sure you tried it as well, is just because you can get a lot of heavy-handed cymbal stuff, a lot of cymbal beats. So you get a little bit of paper towel, and then just put a little blob of it underneath the cymbal here, bit of tape, and it suddenly goes from to just a little bit. You can do that on the hi hat as well, just a little bit, and hide it.
Yeah, and they won't even know.
They won't even know.
Oh wait. They're getting in trouble
now they know.
Now they know.
But yeah, it depends. I know, I hear you, and I think that's a very, very important point. That last thing you want to do is like hamper a musician so they're playing so tentatively that there's no energy left.
Yeah, to me, like I deal with a lot of artists that they want to be artists and they want to do things their way, whether it's Motörhead or Pennywise or all these groups.
Sure.
And some of those groups, like No Effects, I work with No Effects, and you have Smelly, who kind of, I'm gonna say he kind of created that that punk rock beat that everyone plays now. That from Rise Against to whatever it is, like he kind of crafted that. And if we didn't let that artist craft that in the beginning, then what are we doing now? Like so I always try to give people a little bit of freedom. And sometimes that freedom becomes a train wreck, and you know how it is. Like it goes nowhere, but other times it's magic that lasts for years and years. So I always try to first capture those people, and then secondary, okay,
it's very
do
valid,
we need to control it? Or a lot of what I do is actually tell people to be more elaborate and more aggressive and more try to break new grounds in different ways. I love doing that with people.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. ATM 25 on the inside as well. So you love that mic.
It's a great indoor mic. So
Audio Technicas make really good microphones.
Yeah.
And are you a 414s as overheads?
414s, yep. The other one's on the vocals right now, but I love 414s. They're great mics.
What's this here? Don't recognize that.
This is it's a custom made mic. It's called the McHugh military mic. The power supply is back there. It's actually a gun shell, or the you know, where you put the cartridges for ammunition.
Yeah.
And it's a tube mic, and it's interesting. It's rad. It's like you put it in a room. It's awesome. It's
nice.
I had a friend of mine who had a studio for a while, and he built not a lot of them, but it was one of those ones where I'm like, I want an interesting tube mic, and he built it, and there it is.
Nice. And what's it called again?
It doesn't really have a name, but I call it the McHugh military because of the box and everything.
That's wonderful. SG hanging over here.
SG.
Love the SG. Oh, this is nice. Oh, I love the weight.
So I worked on the new No Effects record, and the first time Mike walked in the door, he went straight to that and played that, and he goes, "This is what I like to play." So he's been playing that on the new record.
Oh, it's got a beautiful neck. It's lovely, slim, skinny neck, but just enough meat in there so you can bend, and ebony board. Yeah, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a really, really nice one.
The color's interesting because it gets kind of yellow over the years, but it is what it is. And you can
Yeah,
tell
but the
someone put a
yellow's-
sticker on the back a long time ago.
Right.
And right here.
Oh yeah, but the
Yeah.
yellow's great. You know, because that's I don't know. It gives it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It gives it its own thing.
Yeah, it does.
That's beautiful. What is this?
This is my rock amp.
I know it's this rock
And
amp.
one of my best friends, it was the first amp he ever had was this rock amp. And
Oh,
he
wow.
says, Cameron, you got to listen to this amp. And I'm like, all right. So he puts it in my trunk and I bring it to the studio and I play it once. I'm like, this thing's fun. Next day, I let the band I'm working with rehearse without me. They take this thing and they blow it up. It explodes. And I'm like, I got to give this back to my buddy. So instead of giving back to my buddy, I take it to a guitar shop to fix it. Well, the guy goes to the guitar shop and he puts in one of those, it's supposed to be a fast blow fuse. Well, he puts the slow blow fuse in.
Yeah.
So the thing catches on fire and even explodes more.
Oh.
So then I called my buddy and I said, how much did you buy this amp for? And I had to buy it from him. And then I took it to another guy and he fixed it up for me. So now it works again.
Right.
And it only took him 2 years to fix it because he couldn't find the parts. So,
Yeah, I'm
so
sure,
it's just, it's one of those things where I'm very loyal to my friends and the people I work with. And
Yeah.
I broke it, I got to fix it.
Yeah.
That's my responsibility.
That's
what it is.
great. It looks awesome. It does look like a first amp.
You
My
would,
first amp.
but you would like it because it has this cool distortion. You would be stoked on this thing. It's very interesting. It's cool.
Rock
You'd be
amps.
into
We'll
it.
see what we can find out about it. Awesome.
Yeah.
The Gallien Kruger you were talking about earlier.
One the second bass head I ever owned, and I still have it. It's great. It's been through everything.
Wonderful.
So it's good.
The crate.
Crate was left here by a friend of mine named Justin, who was in the band Zebrahead, and he used to run his solos through this with the BB Sonic Maximizer, and it sounded phenomenal.
Is it solid state or tube?
It is, I don't even know what it is. You know, it's funny, people pick on Crate. Some of the Crate stuff
No,
is
it's tube.
awesome. Yeah.
You know what? I don't. Because for me, some of the exactly what you were saying. I have this Aria pedal, and it's called the Ultra Metal,
Mhm.
and it's awful sounding. If you just used it as a generic distortion pedal, but for the same thing you just said, it's so whiny and screaming. It's amazing for guitar solos.
Yeah.
Because it cuts through everything else. It
Yep.
cuts through all the massive guitars. So I get it. Yeah, Sonic Maximizer, Crate, cuts through everything.
It's part of what we do is like, if we just use the Bogner on every channel on every guitar, you just have this wall. If you have something that sounds different,
Sure.
then it pokes through, and on its own it might not be right, but with other things, that's what we do. That's why like I said, instead of using the amp farms and stuff, we use stuff like this
Sure.
for our diversity.
And then when I worked with Dave Jordan, he used those Vox Super Beetle, those huge things that used to swing on the.
Okay.
And they were an American company building their own amp using Vox branding to basically, using the Beetle name.
Yep.
And so in theory, and they're solid state.
Mhm.
So, but that's most of the huge Alice in Chains guitar sound.
Yeah.
So hey, who am I to argue? When that came out, there was nothing like it.
Yeah.
When Dirt
Sometimes-
came out, it was like massive.
Sometimes it's good to not use
Man in
what
the
everyone
box.
else is using. Use different things.
I agree. So the Mesa here,
Yeah,
So-
just your standard metal sort of Mesa kind of
Great.
metallic-y. It's a cool little amp.
see, now we might get into contentious territory. I have a JCM 900. It's one of my favorite amps. People hate me for saying that because they're like JMPs. 800s were so popular in the 80s, but when I was a kid, they always sounded so thin and weedy. They didn't have that girth that the super leads had. You couldn't get that kind of width, and they were so bright, especially like young ears. And it was just like I was like, oh, this is so thin sounding. And then when the 900 came out, I'm like, I can make this sound like my old JMP, and people are like, no, you're crazy.
Yeah.
But I actually really like my 900.
We're also snobs about like the new thing is never good, and these are actually they're great.
I think they're great.
With the first 2 Motörhead records I did, all the guitars were done through a 900, so it's awesome. It
I'd
just
love to hear it. And they're probably, because 800s are worth a fortune, these are probably quite affordable.
they probably are. I mean,
Yeah.
this belongs to a guy who we work with, Sergio, and he just keeps it here, so I
Great.
just use it all the time. Yeah.
They're one of my favorites. My favorite bands as a kid were Queen and Black Sabbath. And so I was always Laney, everything Laney. These are monster, massive sound. Actually, probably in a day when the 800s were new, these were the opposite. The bottom end out of these things is insane, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Blows your 412 up.
And you know what? No one ever wants to play this.
Really?
You bring it in the room, everyone's like, I'm not gonna touch that thing.
Really?
And no one touches it. And
That's crazy.
I've only used it on a couple records, and it's got these pull knobs that like.
Yeah, it's instant Black Sabbath.
Yeah, it's
Because that's all he's ever used is Lemmy.
okay.
Because it's his childhood friend. It's Tony Iommi's childhood friend.
Okay.
So the very first ones, the first album is the first ones he made.
Yeah.
And he's just like, so you can kind of like pick the period of, and for me, this is like late 70s, early 80s. You're talking like contentious, I know. Look, my dog is called Ozzy for those watching, so I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan. However, Heaven and Hell, one of my favorite records.
Yeah.
You know, the Neon Knights, that's the guitar sound. You get
Yeah.
Neon Knights' massive guitar sound from this amp. Yeah, that's weird.
Good
People
to
don't
know.
use that.
No one touches it.
Well, you know, Paul Gilbert uses Laney and loves him,
Okay.
and his guitar sounds phenomenal.
Yeah.
So.
It's like this. No one uses this either. Everyone's scared because it's modern, and you know what? Some
I'm
days.
probably a little scared because it's got a lot of knobs.
Yeah, it is. It's so
That's the only
confusing.
thing.
It sounds good. It's not. I mean,
No, they're great.
it's similar to this, but it's a little more complicated. So
Well,
Um,
when I was fortunate enough to meet Jeff Beck, he had one of the very first one of these with all the channels, and it made me think, well, if he uses a JCM 2000, I should probably shut up and listen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes people smarter than me to convince me.
you know what's important is like whether it's the internet or all this kind of stuff, and like
Yeah.
we all have opinions, and
Sure.
and some of us are really strong about our opinions. But the reality is, if you want to learn to use something, go plug it in and try for yourself,
Right.
because it might be what you are. Everyone in the world might hate it, but it doesn't matter. Like
No, it doesn't.
be unique and just, you know, I'm getting on my pedestal or whatever, but
No,
that's what I believe is so important about life, is like experiencing and trying it out. And like when people come in here, whatever amp you want to play, plug it in. I'll help you. Here we go. Bam. You like that? No. Bam. Like that? No. And then find your identity within everything you do. And everything doesn't have to be tube. Some things can be solid state. If it sounds good, it sounds good. Who cares?
Well, the bottom end on this thing is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And the fact, like you said, you can pull the boost on the bass, pull the bass on the middle and the treble and everything.
It's kind of complicated. That's why a lot of people don't use it, because right when you plug it in, sometimes it doesn't sound right, and you have to like do the things, the tricks to make it work right. It's not like the Bassman where there's one knob and then you're on 10 and you're good. It takes a little work.
I love the thing. And these are going super cheap. I don't know if they will after this, but I saw a couple of these on Craigslist for like $100.
Yeah.
That's a bargain. All tube, made in England, with a partridge transformer. That's probably worth at least $100 inside this.
They're worth way more than $100. That's like if
Parts alone.
I'll buy one for $100.
Yeah. No, I saw one on Craigslist.
Yeah.
So yeah, the twin.
I need a clean tone. You see, I have a lot of distortion tones.
Sure.
So I either use it. It's a great amp. I love this, or I'll run through like a bass amp sometimes to get clean tones with guitar. So it's just, you know, it's just old school. It's like
Beautiful.
that same. Was it? That's is it 70s when it's this? I think it is.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Late 60s, 70s. Yeah.
It's a great
Blue
little
silver. Yeah.
little
Beautiful.
thing. This is obviously not original, but
It's okay.
it doesn't matter.
You're not selling it. And then the tele.
There's a friend of mine, Davey, who's an amazing guitar player, songwriter. Davey Warsup, and he left it here. He said, I don't want to keep all this stuff in my apartment, so I could use it. You know
What were you telling me the story about the first act?
I bought the first act on my birthday 2 years ago because I was walking down the street with my daughter, and some kid was selling it. And the unique thing about this,
It looks super cool. I know it's a cheap guitar, but
so
it
they
looks
came
great.
with the Volkswagen. It's a Volkswagen Bug guitar, and Dave Matthews was in the commercials for these. So you could take this, plug it into your Bug,
I remember now.
and
yeah.
you switch here, and there's a distortion pedal that kicks on. So it can be clean, distorted. How awesome is that?
Nice.
You know, and it's one of those things. It's just like
it's a novelty, but
a
it's
kid wants to write a
awesome.
song, and he wants to sit in the corner here while we're working there. He can pick it up and then turn the distortion on and have a good time. So
I love the look at it because it makes me sort of feel like a 60s surf guitar. Or
Yeah.
something. Has like a really unique thing.
Yeah,
A
you know.
Motörhead or something. You know, something that has.
sometimes the goofier things, you're going to write something more clever. I mean, if
Especially-
you always...
I didn't notice that, but now all I can see is VW.
Yeah.
Before I couldn't see it. Now VW. So
See,
it's right.
yeah. just you know, there's another Fender.
P
I
bass.
love Fenders. It's not what that one is over there, but it works. You
Does the
plug
job.
it in. It does the job. It's kind of standard.
Now the telly.
This is a beat up telly that I got in the Valley. Just seen better days, but it sounds good. It's a fun
Great.
little guitar, you know.
So what's the battery for? Is it
So this is a special pickup here.
I see.
And with these pickup, it has these other like knobs that we'd have to tweak with it.
Oh, it says Fishman.
So that's a Fishman pickup. That's what it is.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, so it's
beautiful.
The only...
I love this color. It's a weird one.
That's why I got it. I love it. It's an awesome color. The only downside is that the battery runs out a lot. So I'm always putting a new battery in because that's the only disappointing thing about that guitar.
Acoustic Fender bass.
Yes, it's a fun little bass. It belongs to a friend of mine, another friend.
Oh yeah. Whoa. Nice. Love it.
Yeah.
It's probably good for jamming.
Oh,
Sitting around and coming up with ideas and stuff.
Exactly. It's an
idea
thing.
I should get an acoustic bass. That makes a lot of sense to have. I remember Washburn in the 80s used to make a really good one as well.
Get the Fender ones. Those are great.
Those are good?
Yeah, I would totally go for that.
Awesome. So what else we got? We got going on in here.
We used to do drums in this room, and then in here we do vocals, and this is where all the Marshalls go. So when I put all those, here's the thing, I put all those guitar heads in the other room.
Yeah.
So when we can plug them in, and then the lines run into here, speaker lines run into here, so I can turn everything on 10, and we can actually hear what's coming out of the speakers. If you're, like you said, if you're in a room,
sure,
and we have an amp going, you can't hear anything through the speakers. So this is my whole like isolation area, and then people do vocals in here, and just they got to be comfortable and happy when a fairly small space, so we don't have a lot of air within the vocals.
I love the view in here as well. I'm sort of like captivated by that because you can look through here, you see all the lighting and stuff.
Yeah,
it's really awesome. So it's quite inspiring if you're the singer, especially if you're doing scratch vocal when you've got the band around you. Yeah, I love
keep them isolated.
Like yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And this is what you're using for the headphone mixes and everything?
Yeah, I love the Furmans. They're simple.
Yeah, they sound good.
6 channels, they work fine.
So
Standard.
So people are going to ask about this. So this is interesting. You've got a 421 and a 57. Do you find yourself blending them, or is it more of an either or, choose which one you prefer?
I blend them.
You blend them?
Because the thing about these Bogners is there's 2 sets of speakers. So some speakers are like you have, I forget how it is. I'm not sure if it's crossed or the other way. So they're different speakers that those are miking right now. So that's why like.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
So it's not 4 of the same speakers.
Back to Dave Jordan, second time in the conversation. He had a 412 that I borrowed from him for a long time. It's probably a similar thing. He had like a 25, vintage 25, vintage 30, and then a Bulldog, a Vox Bulldog.
Oh yeah.
And he would do the same thing. He'd set up his amp, get a tone, then he'd move his mic around and decide which one he liked. Ah, smart. Yeah. I didn't know Bogner did that.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Take a flashlight and you look in there. And I mean, Bogner, it's the stock one, so whatever they do.
Probably 25 and 30, yeah.
I don't know. But
would they use the Celestians?
I think it's Celestian.
Yeah, it's probably 25.
I don't know though.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'd be lying to you.
Yeah, I know for the longest time the 25 was the more popular one, but working with Tim Pierce recently, he says that he's getting asked more for the 30. He thinks it just sounds a little bit more. He used modern as the way of describing it.
Right.
And what's that cab up there, the red one?
You know, that belonged to a band called Lit, and they used to go on stage and they'd have tons of these. These, and it's a carve-in actually, and they had, I don't know, 50 of them, 60 of them, and at one point they gave me one because we were working together.
Wow.
So that's why this is from whatever that tour, their big tour they did.
Nice.
Everything was like all red, like velvet sort of stuff.
I recorded a band recently live who will remain nameless, but they're a very successful loud rock band, and they have like 40 Marshall cabs on stage. All they are is the face, just the face plate of the Marshall cab.
Yeah.
Genius. I mean, but that's...
I've seen a lot like that. And that I usually use that for bass actually.
Oh, you do?
Not even for guitar. Yeah, when those other heads out there.
I like this Soldano cab as well. I like how simple this is.
Do you want to buy it? I want to get rid of it.
We'll talk. I have a Marshall 412.
Okay.
It's like, you know, it's like one. I think one cab's probably enough.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we could find
No.
we could find somebody.
I have like a couple cabs I like to use, like 2 or 3, but not a lot. The Vox is, you know,
beautiful
workhorse.
Yeah, it's just something magical about Vox. You can't get from any other amp that's so unique sounding.
Yeah.
That mid range is like, boom,
oh, it's so
pokes through.
And the clean, everything you can do with that thing.
Yeah, amazing.
I love it. So, I mean, to me, it's your Foo Fighters kind of sound. It seems like.
Yeah, I love an arpeggios. It seems to give like, especially when you're playing like, you know, an arpeggio that's got twiddly in it. Yeah, so like anything around there just sounds too twing, twing, twing. You put it through a Vox, it kind of adds some 700, 1K mid-range.
Yeah.
And it just helps with that stuff. Yeah.
It does. Now
those are great.
You got to play it for me.
Oh, beautiful.
So awesome.
Oh, so it's got the whole stereo cab.
It's got the stereo cab and the vibrato.
Beautiful. Oh, you just want to... That's crazy. So is it messing with the phase to make it feel wider?
Oops.
It's gorgeous.
The snare drums do. Well, there's 4 speakers. There's 2 in the front, 2 in the back. So I don't know how it diversifies itself.
It's gorgeous. Love. It's probably kind of nice to add to guitars.
Yeah.
That's like
They're
really
great.
tough. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. Oh yeah, that EQ really does something.
It does.
Wow, it's like
Yeah, it fans it.
It's like it
It
moves.
is.
You just want to hold one chord down and just listen to it. That's gorgeous. Yeah.
It's a fun little.
Oh, the VK7. This is really nice.
Yeah.
It's funny. Not funny, but let's see. The VK7 and the Korg one I like better than the Hammond ones. Oh yeah. Yeah, the real keyboard players, not the hacks like me, but they love the Roland one and they love the Korg one over the Hammond one. Sorry for Hammond users. It's just that they just woo. Wow. It's pretty amazing.
Dirty.
Yeah. This is really nice. Wish we had John Lord here or somebody who could really drive it hard.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And what I love about this cabinet that you use is it was meant for pedals, for guitar pedals.
Right.
So you can plug your guitar pedal, your out goes into your pedal and comes back here.
Yeah.
But you can plug in like this other keyboard by just going into the return. And that's that's how you're using the cabinet, because the cabinet has its own head built into it.
Oh, that's so
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's
That's
really
how simple
good.
it was. Just hey, play it. Or you can also jam along. You can have this on and this on, so you could play them both, because this doesn't cut your signal.
Oh, it's so
So
fantastic.
if you wanted to have a bass player come and say, hey, let's work on a song, whoever's playing this can plug in their bass directly to here and jam your bass while they're playing that.
Oh, that's
Isn't
so
that fun?
fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Is it good for a musician? I mean, obviously it was made probably in the 70s, so
Yeah.
you could do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. I love the color. I don't think I've ever seen one that's white before like that.
My friend painted that.
Oh, I
That's
see.
why, yeah.
Very nice indeed. Well, thanks very much, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming by, and I hope I didn't bore you too much.
Oh no, we were just talking about it earlier. I mean, we have videos that are like 45 minutes, and we have ones that are 2 hours.
Yeah.
This will probably closer to the 2 hours once it's edited.
It's funny is like I like to talk about the things that we do, and
Yeah.
it interests me. And even if I go to a party, if someone knows about guitar equipment, that's just what I talk about. I don't talk about
Right.
stocks and things like that because I have no interest in that, or politics. Like, these are the things we love, and this is why we do what we do.
And it's, from my point of view, it's the only thing I know anything about. I don't know diddly whatever. Like I've got opinions on politics, but nothing. I don't post anything online. I'm like, I don't want to get into that because
Yeah.
as soon as somebody pushes me on it, I'll be like, I don't know.
Yeah. Me too. I'm the
I
same.
stick with what I know, and it's pretty limited. Just ask
Yeah.
my wife; she'll tell me that I don't know much about anything except for music.
Come on.
Yeah, but you know,
Yeah, me too.
you're married, you understand.
Yeah, I know. Same deal.
Well, thanks ever so much.
It's a pleasure.
Please, as ever, leave a bunch of questions and comments below. If there's anything specific, I might hit you up
No problem.
just to sort of warn you.
Always.
Yeah,
Hit
fantastic.
me up. Okay.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Have a marvelous time recording and mixing. Please leave some questions and comments below. This has been a lot of fun to hang out with Cameron. I love the fact everything here is self-contained. You think the same way as, well, what we're all doing these days, and that makes sense. Have stuff ready, set up, so you can move quickly and you can be creative.
Exactly.
And, so thanks ever so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Speak to you all soon.